Mr. Cooner, I think we'll get underway. With that, I'll call the regular meeting of Township Council for Monday, June 24th to order. And of course, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and in particular, acknowledge our valued relationships with the Katzie, Kwantlen, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. So with that, I'm going to slow this down just a little bit for everybody to follow along. We've had Delegation C1 request to come back on July 15th, and Delegation C3 to also come instead on July 15th, while adding another Delegation C4 from Deanne, make sure I get this right, Deanne Gurney. So Ms. Bauer will move that amended for those delegations, and then I believe we may have some other amendments. So I'll move that as amended for those delegation changes, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, yes, if I may, Your Worship, I would like to add or vary the agenda an item under trees after A2 of the agenda. That would be called A3 or something. It would be called, and the title is trees.
Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Do you wish to speak to it some more, Councillor Ferguson?
No, I'll speak to it at the time.
Okay, great. So I'll call the question on that amendment to the agenda. That carries. Councillor Richter absent. Can we mark Councillor Richter absent, please? I think we've got another amendment to move by myself to defer item E13 and E14 to July 15th. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on that amendment? So now I'll call the question on those deferrals. That carries unanimously. And let's see. I think that should cover all the amendments. So that, I'll call the question on the agenda as amended. That carries unanimously. I'm going to sadly report, as I did on social media, Township of Langley flags are currently flying at half-mast. I believe, Mr. Cooner, you can confirm this is an unusual situation, and then I'll have a few words.
That is correct, Your Worship. Due to the passing of 3 township employees, we have flying the flags half-mast due to the policy we have currently.
And I want to express, we'll be holding a moment of silence for this here. It's with deep sadness that we've had 3 active employees in a very short time. Elaine Ogden, Victoria Astley, and Cal Rye all tragically pass away for various reasons. We have permission to announce those names, and I'd like to observe a moment of silence for those employees, please. Thank you very much. Of course, on behalf of myself, senior management, and all the members of council, we of course express our deep condolences and thoughts, prayers to their families and loved ones. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, if I may, Your Worship, I would like to move a motion that 3 trees be planted on Arbor Day on recognition of the 3 employees that lost their lives.
I'll second that for sure. Go ahead, Councillor
I
Ferguson.
would also, part of the motion is that the families be notified if this is successful, this motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on that. That carries unanimously. Get a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from the regular council meeting of June 10th, moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Rint. Call the question on B1. That carries unanimously. Get a motion to adopt the public hearing meeting minutes from June 10th, moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rint. Call a question on B2. That carries unanimously. First delegation, I believe, is, make sure I get this right, C1, Tyson Solitki. Please come forward. Yeah, just up there at the microphone. Yeah. And go ahead. You just introduce yourself to council, and then you have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yep.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this. First and foremost, our intentions with, removing a tree wasn't to undermine or sneak around any sort of rules or regulations that are in place. I myself, Tyson, and my wife Sarah, we both grew up in the South Langley area, Aldergrove. My wife's whole family's farmers. I grew up on acreage. And the last 7 years we've spent, working our way up the housing ladder, condo, townhouse, and then we finally, were able to afford a detached property that was an estate sale. It was neglected for about 1.5 years, not maintained for about 5 years. So there was a lot of work to do, a lot of safety issues. We got a 6-month-old daughter and a almost 3-year-old boy. So we got to working towards that stuff. In the meantime, we had a budget to get trees in the front of the property limbed up and one tree taken out so that we could widen our driveway. We were actively getting quotes for that. None of them really made sense at the time. So we kind of were doing other things instead in the house with the plumbing, and we had a 20+ foot branch fall on my wife's car. So I phoned my dad, asked him if he knew a company because I was just used to him getting stuff done at his property all the time. He had someone over there. The quote was right, the price was right. They advised, that I didn't need to take a permit for the one tree that they took out. Two of the three previous companies said the same thing. It had already been topped. It was about 25 feet topped already. So they said, we'll take it out for $300, and you'll have to get a permit for the one tree that I actually did need to get my driveway widened, because it's just a skinny driveway at the time. It just doesn't fit both vehicles. And then, sorry, it was a windstorm that blew the tree or the branch down, and that was the reason why we kind of expedited that situation. So I had gone to work the next day. Work was getting done. I had printed off the permit for submission and filled out the one tree that I wanted to get done. And then, I'm getting a notification that, Township is there giving me a ticket for, north of $10,000 for taking a tree out that I didn't need to take out, didn't want to take out. It was just something that it had no use, and the price was right to take it out. So that's what I did. Obviously I was advised differently, so it's just, we can't afford that. So we were just wondering if there's a way that we can either pay the actual permit fee or, plant trees instead, or do something instead of, receiving the fine that we've taken place.
I see no questions to council, and I'm just reviewing again the memo that was submitted to council. So council does have a memo from staff outlining some of the facts of the situation, and I believe has heard your request for some consideration.
Yeah.
And I'll take that under advisement. Okay, thank you very much. See no questions from council. Next delegation, labeled here C4, probably C2, from, make sure I pronounce this name correctly, Diane Gurney. Did I get that correct? Please come forward.
It's Dean, that's okay.
Dean, okay. So got that wrong, but nice to meet you, and thank you for coming today.
You're welcome. I do have a little presentation if it's called up. Do I call it up, or who calls it up?
Just advance it by.
Yeah, I think so. This is with regards to the soil deposit there that is being proposed. And of course, we're here with Mr. Korpaniski and myself. We're the owners of the property that are just down the road from there, which we used to have cattle on this particular piece of property until there was a large deposit up at the top of the hill there. And when that deposit took place, there was a large amount of water that started to drift down the valley and ended up on our property. And when it does end up on our property, of course, the land now is way too wet in order to have cattle on it. So we've had to change our property and the crop that we now raise on that property. So the ingression of this water that has come from the top of the hill from a previous dump that happened there has resulted in us having to take remedial efforts in making a trench down one side of the property, a trench down the other side of the property, and making a pond at the back of the property so the water can flow into this pond and eventually percolate through the system. So we are opposed to this particular issue because the owner obviously he's the one that's making the profits on this particular thing, and we're the ones that are ending up with the problems. So just to look at this particular situation here, so you can see, this is kind of where the diagram is here, and here, this is the property that we're entailing. We're the ones we're right beside the trailer court there. That's on the left side of the screen. That's our property, and this is where the property that they propose to have to dump this particular soil, which is usually probably a clay-based soil from some ground basement level, which doesn't have any percolation. So as soon as the water hits this clay type soil, it just drains off. It doesn't even go into the subregion there. So you can see from this tropical map here, you can see that it's the hill that, there's our property, and you can see to the right of this, you can see the elevations there that go up. It's quite a steep climb, and of course the water just runs down that hill into our particular property. And here you can take a look at the property there, right beside the trailer park, and you can see that the big hole that we've had to dig in the back of the property in order to have all of this water basically flowing, and there's a trench. You can barely see it there, but there's a trench down on both sides of the property there to divert the water into that particular pond. So what we're suggesting here is that we are asking that this application be rejected unless the particular owner is going to make remedial effects in order to have the water that is going to come from his property dealt with in an appropriate manner so that it doesn't drain down into our property. So the other thing that we should, this whole area, as council probably knows, is under a redevelopment at this particular, a rezoning application for the whole particular area. And I don't know how that's going to end up, but maybe a soil dump is not the appropriate use of this particular property after this rezoning takes place. So we would like to see this particular issue resolved before any kind of granting of a soil dump take place, because with that soil dump, our problem is going to get worse, not better.
Great. I have a question from council. Councilor Van Popta.
Hi, thank you. You've been here presenting before as well on this particular one, correct?
That's correct. And they just before our presentation, they withdrew the application.
Okay, because I was wondering why. I'm like, wait, did we already vote on this? I can't remember if this is maybe a second dump that they're requesting, but so no, they withdrew and now they're trying again?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I have no other questions from council. Council will consider this further today under E3. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We have no No more delegations. I think that's right, Ms. Bauer. Yep, that's it for delegations. Yeah. So dead presentations, item D1 from staff regarding transportation and mobility strategy update. Great. Please go ahead.
Through your worship, my name is Tammy Liu. I work in the Township of Langley Transportation Department. I'm leading the transportation and mobility strategy. Today, I'm happy to introduce Sarah Frigan. She is the transportation planner from Urban Systems Limited. She's going to making the presentation. We also submitted a council memo. It's included in the agenda package. The memo included what we heard report from Urban Systems. So we're happy to address any questions after the presentation regarding the presentation and the memo.
Thanks, Tammy, and thanks everyone for having me today. So I'm here to provide a bit of an overview of the Transportation and Mobility Strategy, also known as the TMS, and provide a summary of the first round of community engagement and some of the input we heard through that process. So what I'm going to walk through is what is the Transportation and Mobility Strategy, provide an overview of how council will be engaged throughout this process and how they would be able to support the TMS strategy and the planning process. I'll walk through the work plan and the schedule for the study itself. I'll start with phase 1 and 2, which is what's already underway today. Then I'll provide an overview of some of the input that was received through the first round of community input. And then I will talk a bit about what's coming up in the future phases in phase 4 and phase 5. And then finally, talk about some of the deliverables that are going to come out of the strategy. So what is the TMS? So it is intended to be a long-term plan for transportation within the township. It's a guide to renewal and enhancement of the transportation system and infrastructure. It will align with transportation and land use plans, and it's intended to create a vibrant, thriving, and sustainable community. It also is intended to achieve the broader goals of the township and address sustainability, safety, equity, and quality of life. It's really intended to achieve those broader aspirations that have been identified in more recent planning documents since the previous transportation strategy. The TMS will include a long-term vision. It is a long-term plan for the community. It will have a vision, goals, and targets, and it will identify infrastructure projects as well as policies and program initiatives that can be implemented to achieve those targets. Also happening in parallel with the TMS is a road safety strategy. It's the same project team that's working on that, so the recommendations of the road safety strategy will be incorporated into the TMS throughout the course of the project. And as I mentioned, there will be some infrastructure recommendations, and those will be prioritized based on short, medium, and long term, recognizing this is a long-term plan. So the 2009 Master Transportation Plan is what is currently being updated. It's out of date and it currently doesn't speak to active modes of transportation and is really focused on motor vehicles and recommendations for roads. So the new transportation strategy is intended to be multimodal and include recommendations for all modes of transportation, including walking, cycling, micromobility, and transit. Another policy document that will be updated through this process is the 2015 cycling plan. So this will be an update to that document as well and will incorporate more current and recent best practices and design guidance that are in place today. In terms of opportunities for council to provide support, the council did endorse the terms of reference for the TMS prior to the start of this project, and will have a role and be involved throughout the course of the study. There will be memorandums and reports to council at key phases and times throughout the project. There will be presentations to council at each of the end of the 5 phases, and there is an option for some council workshops if requested. At the end of the process, it is intended that council will endorse the TMS, and after the TMS is in place, any changes to policy, bylaws, and capital budgets would be approved by council. So the transportation and mobility strategy is going to be developed over a 5-phase process. We are currently in the 2nd phase of the project, just wrapping it up. The first really focused on getting the project launched, kind of building the steps that were needed to move forward with the project. Phase 2 really was a deeper dive, understanding existing conditions and what are some of the barriers and opportunities for transportation. The third phase is going to be looking forward. That's when we'll start to identify the vision, some of those goals and opportunities for transportation. And in the fourth phase, that's when we'll start to identify the preliminary and draft network recommendations, policies, programs, etc. During the fifth phase, moving forward, that's when really the documentation begins, and we start to come together and put together a implementation plan, as well as start to think of some of those high-level cost estimates. So during the first phase of this project, we really focused on clarifying project goals and what are the objectives of the transportation mobility strategy. We developed a clear understanding of how to work together and lines of communication between the consulting team and staff. We developed our communications and engagement plan, which I believe was presented, or at least provided to council. And we collected and pulled together relevant data that would be used throughout the process to understand existing conditions. During the second phase, this is where we did a bit more of the technical work. We developed the transportation demand model. We had an inventory of existing infrastructure that is in place today, looking at all modes of transportation. We did a community profile that allowed us to better understand current travel patterns within the township, some of those land use patterns that will also be impacting transportation, and we did our first round of community engagement. And we're here today to present the results of that. So over the next few slides, I'm going to present some of the key findings from the community engagement. But first off, I just wanted to highlight what we did. So we had over 1,600 interactions with community members through a variety of different methods. We had a community survey, which had over 1,200 responses. We had pop-up events, which were led by staff and allowed people to interact with staff and raise awareness of the project as well as the survey. And there were several events held. We had a road safety workshop that invited different representatives from safety groups throughout the region and province. We had 2 open houses. We had interest group roundtables. We had a presentation to the Agricultural Advisory Committee. And then we had one agency meeting where we met with groups like TransLink, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and others, just to present some of the results that we heard. So the next couple slides are going to present some of those key themes and what we heard through community engagement. Most of what I'm presenting here is specifically from the community survey. When we asked about what outcomes were the most important to community members or to those who completed the survey for the transportation mobility strategy, we heard that reducing traffic congestion and travel times was the most important, followed by improving road safety for all road users and providing more transportation choices. When we asked about what aspect of the transportation mobility strategy or the transportation system was most important and would be able to best address the changing transportation needs within the community, we heard that transit was likely to be at the top, driving and carpooling, followed by walking. Cycling and micromobility were some of the lower that we heard. I'm just going to grab a sip of water. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. So when we asked about how people are currently traveling within the township, we heard that most people are driving for their daily needs, and they are driving on a daily basis. 50% of respondents are walking on a daily basis, 10% are taking transit, 5% are cycling, 4% are using a micromobility device, and 1% are taking Handy Dart. In terms of trip purpose, we heard that most trips made by driving, transit, and Handy Dart are for shopping, running errands, and for social activities. Commuting for work was the second highest purpose for driving and carpooling, and most walking and cycling trips are for exercise or for recreation. So for each of the different modes, we asked about some of the top barriers and as well as the top opportunities, and so those are presented here. For walking, we heard that a lack of infrastructure was the top barrier preventing people from walking more. We heard that some distances are too far, and we also heard that the poor condition of roads and pathways was a factor. In terms of desired infrastructure or what could be done to improve walking within the community, we overwhelmingly heard that more infrastructure would be desirable. So that includes more sidewalks and walkways, more multi-use pathways, as well as unpaved trails. When we asked about cycling and micromobility, we heard that safety was the top barrier, followed by a lack of cycling infrastructure. We did also hear, and this will pop up a couple times with each of the modes, is that there is a percentage of the population that isn't interested in cycling, which isn't uncommon, but really that if we are going to focus on encouraging more cycling, it should be done with addressing those safety concerns and providing more infrastructure. When we asked what type of infrastructure could be implemented, we heard that bike lanes that were physically separated from motor vehicles were the top priority, followed by multi-use pathways. And then we did also hear that just enhancing existing routes could also go a long way. In terms of the top barriers for transit, we heard that transit was not frequent enough and did not meet people who responded to the survey schedule. We heard that transit stops are too far away. And then we also heard that there were some safety concerns getting on and off of transit. In terms of desired improvements for transit, we heard that faster and more direct service, more frequent service, and enhanced walking access to transit stops were desirable. We did ask a specific question about the implementation of rapid transit through bus rapid transit or through the Surrey Langley SkyTrain station or extension, and how likely respondents were to use transit once those new services were in place. We heard that 31% were very likely and 24% were somewhat likely. When we talk about the top barriers for driving and carpooling, we heard that too much congestion was number one, but then we did also hear that there were no barriers for driving or carpooling. But we did hear that safety was also a concern even for people in motor vehicles. In terms of the desired improvements for driving and carpooling, we heard new road connections and widening existing roads, and then enhancing transportation infrastructure. That's, I believe, in to improve safety. But we did also hear that improving walking, cycling, and transit to reduce congestion were also desirable. In terms of what we heard about safety, we did hear some themes that came up in terms of improving driver education, better lighting, reducing speeds on rural roads or looking for ways that infrastructure can help with that, and then concerns around personal safety. So, building on the information we heard through this first round of community engagement, we're moving into phase 3 of the project, which is really focusing on developing that vision, goals, and objectives. So we got a lot of really great information that can help lead the way towards identifying those. We will also be developing transportation targets. We will be starting to look at ways of how we can actually achieve those vision, goals, and targets. And then we will be developing an existing conditions report that really packages it all together and helps us to understand, based on where we are today, how we can move forward. As part of the safety study too, we will be analyzing collision trends to speak to some of the collision and safety concerns within the community. Through phase 4, which will be occurring in the fall, this is when we will start to identify different projects that could be implemented to help achieve the vision, goals, and targets. Some of those policy opportunities and amendments that might be able to be in place. There will be long-term network maps drafted for each of the different modes of transportation. We will be updating the design criteria as well as cost estimates for, cross-sections for new roads within the community. And we will be conducting our second and third round of engagement during this time. So there'll be 2 opportunities to go back to community members with some of the draft plans and the ideas and to get their input. During the 5th phase, this is when we'll be pulling it all together. We'll begin to develop cost estimates for the preferred networks. These will be quite high level, planning level cost estimates, but will help staff move forward with recommendations that will be taken to council. We will identify different funding sources, including DCC eligible projects, and we'll be putting together a phasing and implementation plan. There will also be a focus on how we'll monitor how well the township is doing towards achieving the targets and the vision that's been identified, and also seek endorsement for the transportation mobility strategy. So these last few slides speak to some of the deliverables that are included. So we have already put together a community and engagement plan, which will be updated during each phase of the project. We're putting together urban and rural road design guidelines. There'll be recommendations for a transportation demand management strategy, a curbside management strategy, as well as the final transportation and mobility strategy document. Included in that, the road safety strategy will be a separate document, but as I mentioned, it will be integrated into the transportation and mobility strategy, and there will be an implementation plan, financial strategy, as well as a monitoring strategy. And then lastly, for each of the modes of transportation, there will be maps that are identified to flag which future projects can be implemented in the future. And I thank you. If you have any questions, we are here to answer.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, on the page that is titled, "What is a TMS Objectives?" On the top picture, you've got narrower motor vehicle travel lanes. Can you speak to that, please?
Sorry, which slide? I can flip back to it.
Objectives.
Oh, under, oh gosh, it's right at the beginning, okay.
Right up at the page 3 or 4. Here we are.
Yes, so through the mayor, this was a graphic that was used for the first round of community engagement, which was looking at some of the different treatments and infrastructure options that could help reduce some of the safety concerns within the community. There are some opportunities on some roads to narrow the lane width for motor vehicles, just to create a bit of a narrower space, which can help to reduce speeds. And it can also provide some additional space for road reallocation that might be able to provide more space for active modes.
Did anyone speak to the fact that we have an awful lot of trucks out here, and not heavy-duty trucks, but also large pickups, and that an awful lot of parking lots in particular are not built for and create a lot of problems. So if you can be careful with that and consider us people who drive pickup trucks, that would be great.
Yeah, it's definitely something to consider on a variety of different types of roads and what the purpose of the corridor is being used for.
Yeah, I can confirm for you that Councillor Bailey's truck barely fits in his parking stall provided to him by the underground parkade. So he certainly would have a unique concern. My car is quite small, however, and doesn't require any special consideration within the TMS. The question I have, I really want to thank you again for the work that's ongoing. Is there any way to speed it up and get it done faster? Because after that comes a series of bylaw amendments, such as subdivision and development servicing. There's a lot of ongoing discussion, when my sense is a lot of this is going to be dictated by guidelines and other municipalities that have already done this work. There's a lot of consultation, which is great. Mm-hmm. But if it's slowing it down by 6 months and we're hearing the same things, and we pretty much have a feeling traffic engineers already know what they're going to propose, why not speed it up?
Yeah, I think there is something to be said about it being a long-term plan and really needing to go through a rigorous process in terms of community engagement, and also from a technical perspective, just making sure that the recommendations are kind of grounded in what we're seeing through the analysis and what we're hearing through community members. I think that the timeline that's outlined is doable, and it shouldn't be a problem, but speeding it up, there may be certain tasks that we might not be able to move forward with, I think, if that's the direction that you want to go, or the township wants to go.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken. I don't think anyone here is going to endorse less community consultation on a long-term plan as important as this one. It's just to follow up on that, though, from a rationale for my question. Are you seeing that the sort of the same input again and again, or are you generating value from input as it goes along, or do you find that you tend to hear the same things again and again?
Do you mean in this process so far, or
Or in other
general?
processes as well? Do you sense that it's the same people that are really passionate about this conversation are the ones that are providing a disproportionate amount of the feedback?
I think it varies. I think it depends on the community, and I think it also depends on what's being presented. I think if there's enough new information and there's some kind of decisions that need to be made from the engagement process, and it does feel like there's an opportunity to change the direction of the plan as a result of the engagement, then I think you will hear from other voices. It's hard to tell at this stage, but usually, because each phase is presenting different information, I do think it is valuable. And you do hear from different people who have different interests in different areas.
No, that's great. I think, again, we really appreciate the long-term process and all the extensive consultation. And of course, I'm assuming everything's occurring that can occur to draw as many new people and residents into the process as possible, to try to get a widest range of feedback as possible.
Yeah.
Given I can't think of something that defines the community more. Of course, neighborhood planning and other things, but one of the major long-term plans that determines what your community is going to look and feel like on a daily basis is this one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation and all the work done so far. One of the things I was interested to hear about was the potential for council workshops as part of this process. And I was wondering, in your opinion, when would be an appropriate time to start one or have the first one, especially going into this next phase where it's a bit more oriented around the goals and the objectives? Would that be an appropriate time to probably have our first one?
Yes. Yeah, I would typically say it would be to talk about some of those goals, objectives, and targets, because those are where really the basis of the recommendations that come later on in the project are founded from, depending on the direction that they go. So yes, I would say kind of at the end of mid to end of phase 3.
Okay, perfect. And then, and it might be a better technical question to ask at another time, but in regards to the travel demand model that was used in phase 2, can you explain a little bit more as to what you were looking for out of that? Because obviously with the network we have now and the mode share that, was described at the open houses where it's already 89%, I think something like that, people use their cars. But in the survey, it's only 70%. I'm wondering what you were looking for in that demand model and what came out of it.
Yeah, I should preface that the demand model will be used throughout the course of the project as well. And we're still currently working on that. It's not complete at this time. But yes, it's intended to, one, understand existing conditions, like areas where there's congestion, where there may be some challenges in terms of level of service at intersections, but then and along corridors, but it will also be used to test out future scenarios and other projects that are being proposed. We can also look at if we anticipate a change in mode share towards more transit trips, how that impacts the road network. So it will be used quite a bit throughout the project, and we'll be putting in different potential projects to see how it impacts the transportation network.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for being here today and for your presentation. That's excellent information. And the update on where we're at, I was able to get to a couple of your open houses, dropped in to talk to people about it, and I think it's great that we engage people in the conversation. And I apologize if I may have missed this already in your presentation. I know you referred to reviewing collision data. What about with regards to emergency response? If police, fire, ambulance are being engaged as to what's important to them in trying to get to calls on reimagined networks. At what point do you do that, or do you?
Yeah, so we do have emergency responders as part of the road safety strategy advisory group, and they attended the first meeting. And I do also believe we have some members as part of our internal working group as well. So they're a group that's involved throughout the course of the project that we meet with, again, kind of at each phase.
That's excellent. No, thank you very much. And as was already mentioned, I look forward to a council workshop at some point. I think that'd be great. So good work.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you again for coming. Yes, it's a good report. And, I have more of a specific question. As you know, it's all over. We're getting SkyTrain coming into Langley and the township. So there's three kind of users. You've got the City of Surrey, City of Langley, and of course us. And I can only speak to our particular one site we have coming through. Is that part of your plan, talking to those folks, and also that type of mobile, transportation model for that area, if I may?
Yeah, so in terms of talking to the city and the City of Surrey and the City of Langley, as well as TransLink, yes, they are all involved in this process as well. That agency meeting that I mentioned was one that would involve them. And then, yes, the impact of SkyTrain will be included as part of the model, and it will also be looking at just some of the population projections as redevelopment is likely to happen in that area too. And the relationship between land use and transportation will be really important considerations with the new SkyTrain as well as the bus rapid transit.
So I guess a supplemental question, and I ask you to be very, clear in your negotiation, so to speak, because there's a lot of people coming from the township of Langley to that one site. So they're going to want to know how they're going to get from a location several kilometers away. So I just want to make sure you're very cognizant of that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Transit to and as well as active transportation connections to the SkyTrain will be imperative.
Yeah, I want to thank you again, and that members of council touched on it. One thing I've noticed is how do you coordinate with another municipality that isn't adjacent, but is in the middle of, and coordinate something? What are the steps are you going through? Because one of the things that I've noticed is the City of Langley is not aligned with the Township of Langley in widening the 200 Street corridor along with development for the purposes of future transit. And we're going to have many lanes. We're going to have those set aside for transit and for active transportation. And they're allowing development to proceed directly adjacent to the existing width of the corridor. How is the Township of Langley going to manage that, where we're clearly going to have a choke point with our north-south transportation requirements due to the no fault of our own?
Yeah, that's a very challenging one. And the City of Langley is also in the process of updating their transportation plan as well. I don't know if I can fully speak to that. I think it's about just ongoing communication and coordination.
I think that's a very specific problem that we're going to have in aligning the development North Langley with South Langley and transiting through another municipality that doesn't have the same transportation policies and priorities that we do.
Yeah.
Mr. Cordero?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The 200 Street corridor within the township, obviously with the 220/40 vision, we've looked at what the future configuration of the corridor will look like. That's down to 68th Avenue, which is the area where the Willowbrook plan starts. So it's our intent as part of the Willowbrook plan update that we would secure whatever property is needed along Willowbrook Drive or along 200 Street to accommodate the BRT. The city boundary is 62nd Avenue. So we believe that the BRT would divert north of the boundary onto Willowbrook Drive to the SkyTrain station. So we can still accommodate the BRT fully within the township if that's the way that it goes. And there's still, as part of SkyTrain, TransLink always does what they call a bus integration plan. So the service that used to be on Fraser Highway will be converted to local buses that would connect to the SkyTrain stations. So that would be the way that we would connect, I would think, like the Brookswood area, the Murrayville area, and obviously Willoughby with the BRT. I hope that answers your question
Yeah,
there.
it does answer a portion of it, and I think you're hitting on the issues. It has to be coordinated where possible.
Right.
But there's a specific example of a brand new building at 56th Avenue and 200 Street, which was allowed to proceed without so much as securing another lane for rapid or bus rapid transit. How is that problem going to be solved for our residents in South Langley, current and future?
Yeah, so thank you, Your Worship, for that question. As part of the Brookswood Fernridge plan, there was some examination of how the travel would go north-south, and we realized that there was limitations in the road network going north-south, which is why in the modeling work that was done, it was shown that some of the traffic would divert over to 192nd Street, which also has the railway overpass and connects to the Langley bypass. So the congestion in the Langley City core essentially diverted traffic to go around it. So it's a longer distance, but it's a shorter travel time. It also may change the pattern in terms of where people want to go. Unfortunately, it may mean that some residents of Brookswood, rather than shopping in Willowbrook, they might go to South Surrey, like the 32nd Avenue interchange. So it does change travel patterns. Traffic will always follow the path of least resistance. So having that congested core does provide an issue. There is some capacity on 208th Street on the other side, but as you mentioned, 200 Street itself is going to be constraining the capacity of being able to move people through that area.
Specifically within the city of Langley.
Yeah, that's correct.
To transit
Yeah.
north-south. So hopefully this will be addressed, I'm assuming, within the TMS process of how this is going to be managed. And also to reiterate, which I know Mr. Cotero already knows, like his council has endorsed that the BRT terminus will be at the Willowbrook SkyTrain station, full stop. Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Reports to council, item E1, Agricultural Land Commission application number 100454. Does anybody wish to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on E1? Seeing none, I'll call a question on E1. That carries unanimously. Item E2, Official Community Plan Amendment, application number 100258. Does anybody wish to move the recommendation for deferral? Moved by Councillor Rint, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Is there any discussion on E2? I'll actually maybe provide a bit of context for E2. This one here would require a 2/3 weighted vote with the Metro Vancouver Board to extend the urban boundary for the purposes of institutional use. I see no chance of that being approved. Therefore, I believe they're much more successfully on a path to what they're looking for, going through the completion of the Fraser Highway Employment Lands area process. So with that, I support the deferral to actually assist them. Any other discussion on E2? Being none, I'll call the question on E2. That carries unanimously. Item E3, does anybody wish to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rint. There's two speakers from council. I just wanted to suggest that I will be moving deferral of this for one meeting to meet with staff to review the delegates' concerns. Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and perhaps it'll wait until the next one because my question was going to be around the fact, through yourself to staff, had the proponent actually provided any kind of plan to mitigate runoff onto the neighboring property to address that concern, but perhaps we can just wait if it's going to be deferred.
Councillor Richter?
Yes, I think that the whole question of water retention or having to have water retention where additional fill is going in should be addressed. I'm just curious, though, why would it just be a meeting between the mayor and not between mayor, council, and staff?
If you wish to have a meeting with staff on the application, you're more than welcome to do so.
Oh, so we each do our own thing. Okay, thank you.
That's what I'll be doing. Seeing no other discussion, I'll move deferral. Is there a second to deferral? Councillor Rint is moved seconded deferral. Call the question on deferral. That carries unanimously. Councillor Rint?
We call a conflict on E4 and E5.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so E4, I'll move it. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on E4? Councillor Richter.
So I'm assuming we're moving endorsement. Is that?
That's the motion on the floor. That's
okay?
Correct.
And it says in endorsing this request, council has considered the views of area residents expressed to council through written submission prior to June 24th. How many submissions did council get on this matter?
Mr. Cooner?
Through your worship to Councillor Richter, we received no submission in relation to this.
No submissions?
Yes.
Okay. And was it advertised?
Through your worship to Councillor Richter, is advertised pursuant to the policy in relation to liquor endorsements.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, call the question on E4. That carries unanimously. Item E5, does anybody wish to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on E5? Councillor Richter.
Same thing. How much public input was received and where and how was it advertised?
Mr. Cooner, are these not, these items are not included in the report because these occur right up to the council meeting, is that correct?
Yes, Your Worship.
Yeah.
And for this one, we did receive one submission from the member of the public.
Okay, thank you.
That'll call the question on E5. That carries unanimously. Get Councillor Rent back, please. Item E5, telecommunications tower application number 00010. Does anybody wish to move either A or B? Suggest we start with A. So moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on A? Councillor Richter.
Yes, I note from the material in the report that the owner of the telecommunications, or the property where the telecommunications is going to be located, is the Rose of Sharon Baptist Church. The address given is 40572 48th Street. I just wanted to confirm that that was the right address for this church, because I believe the church moved years ago.
To Your Worship, to Council Rector, I believe that is the address we have on file for the owner, and I believe there's a title search that should be included in the file.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martins.
Thank you. And maybe my question has been partially answered with the previous one. I was confused when I was looking through the agenda package, not seeing any communications from the actual church, and wondering if they're okay with this being in their parking lot. And so, I don't know, maybe it's because they're no longer there.
To Your Worship, to Councillor Martins, I believe the owner would still remain the same, and it's TELUS Cyber Land Services that usually has an agreement with an owner to put up a telecommunication towers. More than likely, most of these telecommunication companies do not own the land. They will do a lease or some type of an agreement or partnership with the land owner to install this telecommunication tower.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we definitely need more of these towers, so that's great. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, just a little housekeeping question, if I may, through the chair to staff. Now, we have an application that's be applied to any tower comes up in the future, so I'll only ask the question once. Yeah, they kind of, the Canada, ISED Canada, they ask for input, but it's just input. They can still proceed with or without a report, our information, if I may, through the chair.
To Your Worship, to Councillor Ferguson, that is correct. The jurisdiction lies with the federal government on this item, specifically the innovation, science, and economic development. Therefore, that they're just seeking our comments, they can still provide the endorsement or license through their regulations.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, my question was similar. Having been on councils in the past where these towers have been controversial, was there any public input or any opportunity for public input? I note that the policy says that there are certain towers that don't require public input. Was this one of those towers?
To Your Worship, to Councillor Richter, the telecommunications tower, it's a council policy, and within that, I believe it's section 3.4. There's public notice and consultation. The only time it's not subject to public consultation is, I believe, when it's below 30 meters, and I believe this does exceed that, so we did go through the public notice and consultation process.
Okay, and what did that look like? Did we do a mail out or did we just run advertisements?
The policy itself, through Your Worship, to Councillor Richter, states that all public notices and consultation will be rest with the proponent. So the proponent is required essentially to consult with the public. It needs to be completed, I believe, 120 days prior to the proposal being accepted. And then at the conclusion of it, all correspondence are provided to staff. So I believe we didn't receive any correspondence or submission from the public on this item.
Okay, thank you.
Call the question on E6A. That carries unanimously. Item E7, does anybody wish to take this up? What are you moving the recommendation in the agenda, Councillor Pratt? All three. All three? Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Martins. Go ahead, Councillor Richter, go ahead.
I had a question with regards to the report, which basically says, if I'm on the right one, that it's just staff time will be the cost to the township. So I'm wondering how much staff time will be required for this, especially given the mobility transportation plan that we just had a presentation on that says these scooters aren't a large factor in the process.
Your worship, to Councillor Richter, I believe staff time will be limited as it will be specifically in relation to developing online communications, which would be a part of the communications department, their overall role and responsibilities. The other item that may contribute to staff time would be bringing a report back to council, giving an update from a year to date.
Okay, so I guess what I'm really asking for clarification on, we're not going to have to hire a specific person to run this, are we?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, that is not our understanding unless we've been directed by council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions for clarification, if I may, through the chair to staff. In the package originally, there was a set of draft bylaw amendments to our traffic bylaw, in addition to what already exists in the Motor Vehicle Act, the electric kick scooter pilot project regulation. And if I'm understanding correctly, our bylaw officers do not currently have the authority to enforce any moving offenses. It all falls to the RCMP. And I'm wondering if it's necessary that we have two sets of legislation here, both the Motor Vehicle Act and bylaws, or if the Motor Vehicle Act would be sufficient, because that is what the RCMP would fall back on in any enforcement. If you could clarify that.
To your worship, to Councillor Martin, so historically staff to take the position we may need to amend our highway traffic bylaw. In any event, now the report's being brought forward and the province stepped in and amended the Motor Vehicle Act. They specifically have now included an electric kick scooter pilot project regulation. That pilot project regulation now makes it moot to bring forward and amend the highway bylaw because the contents within that are pretty specific and cover majority of the concerns or go above and beyond. They specifically state the minimum age, the general operation requirement, the duties of the operator, and where to operate on a highway. This would leave it to the RCMP to enforce, because currently the bylaw enforcement department does not do moving violations. We will be looking at potentially options to allow our bylaw enforcement officers to do that, but that would be somewhere in the near future.
Thank you. So I hope then that if this moves forward, that it is communicated to our local RCMP detachment, because it isn't happening clearly across the region. When I looked at the list of communities that had opted in, they did not include our neighbors of Abbotsford or Surrey. And since they will be squarely the enforcement body for this new legislation, it's important that they have all of the information at the management level, because they will need to figure out a internal training process of all their operations staff who might come across these sorts of things. So that would be a request if I could, through the chair to the staff. And the other point I just want to make is that there is potentially cost to the Township of Langley in that this is adding one more thing to our RCMP detachment, one more piece of legislation that they're responsible for enforcing. So there is a cost in police resources, to keep that in mind. And to that, are we considering increasing police resources to go alongside this pilot project?
Your worship, to Council Martins, not at this moment, and it is premature to see the implications of it, so not at this time.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I look at this, especially on page 3, when they're talking about must wear a helmet, must be 16 years of age, and also the speed limit. You know, and I go, I really wish they would make stuff that is realistic. Right now, you're seeing kids in elementary school running around on these things, both with and without a helmet. The speed, I saw one of these guys going through traffic that was doing well over 50 kilometers. And when it looks at very similar legislation where you have to wear a helmet on a bicycle, I also don't see that being enforced. And knowing that right now only the RCMP can enforce that, and they're pretty busy right now anyways, I really wish that, one, they would write realistic legislation, and two, if they're going to go ahead with this, I don't see any or much mention about education in the schools. And I really think that while they say no one under 16 is going to ride these things, is allowed to ride these things, the reality is they already are, and I will be interested to see if that will be enforced and practical. So I really hope that part of this will also be a pretty extensive education in the school system, and that includes elementaries.
That, I'll call the question on E7. That carries. Councillor Rint opposed. Item E8, 2023 Annual Report, 2023 Statement of Financial Information. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rint. Is there any discussion on E8? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I have some questions based on the report. I just have to go and find it here. Page 20. Okay, I'm looking first at page 20 and then again on page 21. My first question on page 20 is the column which is prior year amount paid in 2023, which is there for all employees that are listed. What is that relative to? I'm guessing it would be the collective agreement approval, is that correct? So it's past retro pay?
Your worship, to Council Richter, that is correct. So any differences and the implications of a union agreement being ratified would then be prior year payouts.
Okay, so the remuneration that's paid there, does that include the retro pay from the prior year, or is the retro pay in addition to the remuneration that's listed?
Dear worship, to Council Richter, it's in addition to, so that was remuneration for that year, and this would be prior year amount paid in 2023.
Okay. And if people joined the township in 2023, do they get retro pay? Did they get retro pay in 2023?
Through your worship, to Council Richter, if there was a difference and the percentage applied to them for that year, they would be paid. For example, if they joined the township in January or March, it would be, and the union agreement was ratified, and for that year there's a 2% increase, they would be awarded that 2% increase from the time they started.
Okay, and why is that? Is it in the collective agreement?
To your worship, to Council Richter, that would be, I believe, in the collective agreement. That's how it would work. Any increase while you've been employed, you'd be entitled to.
Okay, well, I understand that, but I'm saying if they weren't employed in the township in 2022 or previous, which is where the retro pay would come from, why would they get retro pay when they weren't employed?
To your worship, to Council Richter, they wouldn't for 2022 if they weren't employed.
Okay. My other question on page 21, it says there were 6 severance agreements under which payment commenced in the fiscal year 2023. Why are these not listed? Or why is the amount not listed?
Your worship, to Council Richter, it's not required pursuant to the legislation.
Okay, but everybody else's pay is listed. Why wouldn't people who have resigned, their pay be listed as well?
It's not statutory obligation to list any of those agreements. Therefore, that's why it's not listed.
Okay. And then I'd like to flip forward to pages 83 and 84. And I just wanted to make sure of the denomination. So looking first at page 84, the balance at the beginning of the year was 2,037,299. Is that 2 million or more than 2 million? Are there 3 zeros missing there? Sometimes when we get accounting reports, it's expressed in thousands instead of millions.
To your worship, to Council Richter, I believe it's triple zeros that would be missing, so that would read 2 billion, I believe.
2 billion, okay. And so the same thing on page 83 with the list of statutory reserves. They're listed there as thousands, but it's actually millions, correct?
To your worship, to Council Richter, I believe that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
So no other discussion, I'll call, no, Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, so just to help me understand the financial statements, I know I had earlier in the year asked about CACs. There in number 8 here, it says development cost charges. So there's a whole section on DCCs for roads, drainage, parkland, everything else. Where would I find that information about CACs in this huge document? I know it could possibly be under cash, but that doesn't really, probably a lot of things that could be considered cash through your worship too.
Yeah, Mr. Cooner, Ms. Ruff.
The CACs aren't identified separately. They end up in the general reserves.
Okay, so we don't really know how much CACs we collect every year, or would that be something that I could request?
Dear worship, to Councillor Kunst, that is an internal item that we can advise you of, but as Ms. Ruff has highlighted, that would, on an actual consolidated financial statement, would be a part of general.
Okay, just the only reason I'm asking is because we're talking a lot about CACs and how they're going to be paying for things. So that really was why I wanted, a month ago, a report on, where that was at. And I just still don't have a clear picture of that. And as you can see, there's really no developments on this agenda to even collect CACs. So I'm just getting a little concerned about that number, and I would just like to know what it is. So that's all. I just wanted to find out a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, no, that's a good question that Councillor Kunst raised. So for us to get the list of CACs, how do we get that list?
Mr. Cooner, I believe the annual budget process would outline all of that. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. What page on the budget is it on?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, I'd have to check what page on the budget it is on. The budget is a separate document than this consolidated financial statements.
Okay. So would it be possible for that list to be circulated to council?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, it would be possible.
Okay, do we have to write you a request to get it, or can we just get it?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, yes, you would just have to request it, and we can provide it to you.
Okay. And I had one more question on this one. It says in the actual motion here that upon receiving and considering submissions and questions from the public. Now, in previous meetings or previous councils, we always sort of had a public hearing that we asked for submissions on it. Did we ever do that? Did we ask for public input on this?
No,
Or
Mr.
will
Cooner, I've been, I mean, I don't know about previous years, but I'm in council 5 years. I don't recall a public input opportunity or public hearing on the Sophie report. What are you referring to, Councilor Richter?
The 2023 audited financial statements upon receiving and considering submissions and questions from the public.
I believe you stated, however, this is the first year you've not seen a public hearing on this. I've never seen a public hearing on it. So what are you referring to?
Well, I recall previous mayors asking for input from the public on the statements, and was there any input? Called it three
Does
times.
anybody else recall this, Councilor Ferguson? I mean, but if that's fine, if you want to state that as fact, that's fine. Yeah, we can come back to you. Yeah, we'll come to you, Councilor Ferguson, in a moment. Yeah, thank you.
So did we get any submissions or questions from the public? Like,
Mr. Cooner?
did we ask for any, and how did we ask for it?
To Your Worship, to Councilor Richter, we advertise it in the newspaper pursuant to the Act. We haven't received any correspondence from members of the public. Members of the public can correspond and request a delegation and comment about the 2023 annual report or the audited financial statement.
And so we received no submissions this year.
To Your Worship, to Councilor Richter, that is correct.
Okay.
And Ms. Ruff or Mr. Cooner, are you aware of any process changes around public input or related to the Sophie report going back many years?
It's not just the Sophie report.
I have a question. I'll ask my question, Councilor Richter. Go ahead. Do you recall any process changes that were mentioned by the councillor?
I do not recall any
Yeah.
process changes, and I'll refer to Ms. Ruff as she has a bit more tenure than I do in this.
There's been no changes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you. Councilor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, the only thing I recall is that the fact that over the years, we used to have print copies, and now there's an awful lot of things online that people can get from our webpage and otherwise, and also requests from the clerk. And I remember, I think one person asked me if they could get a paper copy so they could see a picture of council. Anyway, it's something that's always been available to the public but we've never had, from what I can recall, public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you. Call the question on E8. That carries. Councilor Richter opposed. Item E9, I will move that. That's seconded by Councilor Rent. I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. I think this is great. I think we'll be able to consider much more than this in the years ahead. I am working on that, but I think this is a great step to see this continue, and that tree planting activities have been significantly increased under this council. Councilor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to echo thanks to staff for getting this in the pipeline. When I looked at the map of the proposed locations for tree planting moving forward, was really excited to see the number of potential trees planted in areas of high growth, but then also looking at a very big green blob on Horn Pit, which is a good thing to see.
Councilor Richter?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions here on this report. The first one is the tree voucher program, and that's discussed on page 5 in the report. So Township is proposing a pilot project where people can get a voucher for $350 towards an eligible tree species at a local nursery. How long will this pilot project run for, and will council be getting a report back on it?
Mr. Cooner?
Through your worship, it's a pilot program, so it'll run until the vouchers run out, and then we'll likely come back to council to report on the success.
So how many vouchers are available, and how can the public access them?
We'll be working through that, so we're estimating 500 vouchers, and staff will be, if approved, staff will work through the fall to put the program in place for the beginning of 2025.
Okay, so fall of 2024 implementation. And then I was just wondering, it's great to see where trees are being planted, but is there a comprehensive map of mature canopy removed in 2023?
Mr. Cooner?
Through your worship, we don't have that available at the moment, but
Is that something that could be generated or added to future reports?
we would likely need to look at reports and information available to see if we could put something like that together.
I believe, Mr. Cooner, last time that was done, there was a comprehensive canopy study done a number of years ago, Mr. Rule, if you remember. and that was to pursue identifying the degree of tree canopy on public and private property, but the tracking of tree canopy under private property is mostly done by Metro Vancouver at this point. Is that correct? They would be able to provide, I believe they provide reports through the Regional Planning Committee that outline the loss of tree canopy, and that's available via Metro Vancouver.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
But I recall the township did a report on that, because didn't we have a task force that looked at, it was just last term, I believe, Councillor Arneson and Councillor Whitmarsh ran it, and they came out with a map. I recall seeing a map of the canopy that currently exists, and it was in the range of about 40%, 38 to 40% right now.
That would be unfortunately incorrect. I believe the average tree canopy within the township is hovering around 31 to 32%. The 40% you referenced is within the Brookswood Fern Ridge area exclusively.
Okay, so do we have any maps of how much canopy has been removed out of Brookswood and how much is being replaced?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kuhner or Mr. Rule, but that would require undertaking, I believe, the consultancy to do another survey of overall canopy in the township. The original report that Councillor Richter is referring to is related to the formation of the tree canopy strategy, tree management plan, and it fed into the tree protection bylaw, but it would require another detailed survey conducted by the township. However, that data is available via Metro Vancouver. There's no need for the township to do it as far as I know. Metro Vancouver is providing a significant amount of updates annually or every 2 years on the tree canopy changes throughout Metro Vancouver within the urban containment boundary.
Okay, well, I still think that this report going forward should probably include a map of the mature canopy removed each year, so we know how much we're depleting, and we can correlate that to how much we are replacing.
I believe there would be a significant cost attributed to that, so if you wish to bring that forward in the budget process to have an annual amount to provide that for you, that could certainly
No,
be
I just think
considered.
you're dealing with one-sided information here, and that's wrong. When we're talking about the environment, we should be looking at both sides. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yes, I did mean to speak with Councillor Pratt about this because I know he was at the FCM as well as I was. And there was an area at the FCM where they had a kind of a green area, green zone, and they were promoting a number of environmental and green projects, including planting. So I was glad to see this here today, and I appreciate the comments of Councillor Pratt as well, is that planting, the more trees we can get planted in certain areas, it would be great, and I think it's a great program. And in the past, I'm not sure if anybody can remember, maybe I'm just looking. We had CN plant a number of trees in the community. So any time we can get an opportunity to plant trees, we appreciate staff going out and getting those grants. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank everybody again for advancing this. I think it's great to focus on the positive, not just the negative. That we are moving forward with significant tree planting in public areas, as outlined within the report, and using those non-refundable deposits from the amended tree protection bylaw to get this done. I think there's a lot more that can be advanced in years ahead. To see the planting of thousands of trees within the urban containment boundary, to see us move on a path to actually achieving these objectives. Within the last few years, tree canopy within all of Metro Vancouver within the urban containment boundary decreased by 1%. We have some areas of the township that are at 40% and other areas that are as low as 14%. And I think it's great to start advancing a real plan to address some of these chronic challenges that are going to take years to repair, that have been left for so long, and finally getting to a plan to plant thousands of trees, I think is a positive thing. I don't look for the negatives on this one. So I'll call the question on E9. That carries unanimously. Item E10, I'll move the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on E10? Councillor Richter.
I'm just wondering if I'm understanding the math here correctly. So we have a fire hall that we've gone through a borrowing bylaw process for $25 million. By us applying for this additional 10 million of funding, which I don't disagree with, I think we should be applying for it, does this mean that the cost of the hall will increase 10 million over the 25 million that was borrowed?
Dear Worship, to Councillor Richter, the original 25 million of the debt would potentially be then reallocated to other fire hall related projects. It would not increase. We are essentially, it says we're applying to up to $10 million, and we have to, it's proportionate on what is given the actual grant itself. It's, I believe, 80% of eligible cost, 15% would be a grant on what is actually awarded.
Okay, so the 25 million that we borrowed, that would come down by 10 million and we'd reallocate it? Like, can we do that under a borrowing bylaw?
To your worship, we would have to Councillor Richter would have to then, I believe, bring forward to council authorization to reallocate it and the bylaw forward as well associated with that borrowing bylaw. To clarify, in the event we will, if we are reallocating it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. Just noting submission of a grant to Federation of Canadian Municipalities for Sustainable Municipal Construction. And I was reminded of in 2022, I had the opportunity to tour in Vancouver Fire Hall number 17. And I know that that was a pretty expensive project, but also pretty amazing. I know they received a lot of funding with that property, and it's a just looking at their site right now, a leading, highly efficient, all-electric, zero-emissions building, reducing operational carbon emissions by 99.67%. Achieved LEED Gold certification and net zero energy as defined by FCM, and design strategies including an airtight envelope, efficient air, heat, and water recovery systems, and electric heat pumps. And they're currently, the passive house certification is also underway for this building. I don't know, so maybe I'm dreaming a bit here, but I'm wondering if there is an opportunity for us to consider maybe something along that lines when we're looking at this funding of duplicating what's been done in Vancouver, or even achieving close to that benchmark. That's a pretty incredible building, and I think it's very unique as far as Western Canada goes. So it'd be a question, if I can, through the chair to staff about that.
Dear Worship, to Councillor Martin, staff will definitely be taking that into consideration, ensuring that we're constructing with high performance buildings and high energy efficient and low carbon operations. So those are items we are definitely taking into consideration.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, just speaking further to that, I agree that we should try and make this as efficient as possible. I just took a passive house class course actually, and one of the business case examples that we studied actually was the fire hall in Vancouver and the challenges met with that and the price associated to it. And I think that we can accomplish quite a bit in terms of efficiencies. Civic buildings like fire halls have significant challenges with passive house. So I just encourage that we keep our mind open and find all the ways that we can so that we're making sure that we get the best bang for our buck when it comes to constructing civic projects. Thanks.
Councillor Ferguson?
I know I'm deviating from the fire hall, but perhaps a question to staff, perhaps Mr. Winslade, as we comment on this building ourselves. This was basically a building that had a number of environmental things added. Mr. Winslade, could you please comment to that?
This building achieved LEED Silver under the Commercial Interiors Program and was actually the first in Canada under that program.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I think this additional 10 million not only can participate with the 25 million already, but as this goes forward, right now everything's going up in cost. You know, you look at other projects, it's not just inflation. This is to all kinds of cost advancements when it comes to anything and everything. I can point out, you know, an exceptional one over in the North Shore that I'm quite sure everyone's heard about. But I think what this does is this gives us the possibility of a cushion for any unexpected things that come up. And when you're dealing with emergency buildings that also are not just to serve for a fire hall, but all the new buildings like this are also for places of refuge in emergencies. So that kind of consideration, I think with the $10 million on top of the 25, is gives the people that are planning this new hall some leeway to as it goes forward. And I know they're using the IDP. I think the process is IDP, which is already saving us an awful lot of money through that process. Really glad to see they're doing that. But I think this kind of stuff gives us the opportunity to also take advantages of anything that may come up in the future that could either save us money or advance a project better.
Seeing no other discussion, I certainly support E10. So call a question on E10. That carries unanimously. Item E11, I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on E11? Councillor Richter.
My question on this one, so we're adding another 7 million to the 25 million for a total of 31.9 million for the new fire hall in Brookswood. That's a 28% increase. And that's why I was asking about, what about this 10 million from the previous motion that could be a grant? So what is going to be the final cost of this new hall? Is it going to be 10 million from FCM plus 7 million from the CACs, plus the base 25 million? Like, do we have a final cost for this hall yet?
Mr. Cooner?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, yes, the cost is 31.9 million. That would be the funding envelope, with 6.9 million being allocated from CACs. Currently, it would be the 25 million borrowing bylaw that's been approved. In the event the FCM grant is approved, then there'll be some excess of the borrowing bylaw, which then can potentially be reallocated, or we will then bring forward a report to advise of the changes to the necessary bylaws.
Okay. Now, how firm is our cost on this 31.9 million? Like, that's the funding envelope now. It's being increased by another 6.9 million. How firm is that?
To your worship.
Or are we anticipating even more increases just with the cost of construction out there?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, as Councillor Bailey did highlight, this project, we took a bit of a unique approach with an integrated project delivery team. So that's an IPD. Within the integrated project delivery team, we did have a general contractor, architect, mechanical consultant, electrical, structural, and civil. So we're confident in the funding envelope that's been established. Obviously, we cannot foresee or predict any inflation or cost escalation, but we're very confident in the numbers proposed.
Okay, and at one point, didn't council have some sort of a discussion about having housing attached to this, particularly for single parent families? Some sort of a housing component? That doesn't look like it's in the design right now.
Mr. Cooner, council made that decision when it originally approved the project not to proceed with that component, but instead to locate it adjacent or in direct proximity to.
Yeah, that is correct, Your Worship.
So
that was considered and directed by council.
Okay, so if it's located adjacent, that would be a separate cost then from the base fire hall.
That's correct. It's a form of housing that you described or other potential options has been designated within the Fernridge Community Plan. Sorry, Fernridge Neighborhood Plan.
And to Your Worship, to Councillor Richter, just one clarification. That would be a separate authorization to even approve the project and fund the project. That would not be a part of this report or a separate report just seeking more funding for it.
Okay, well, I have to say I'm a little concerned that the price is already up 28%, and it's like a year since the borrowing bylaw was first introduced. Just saying. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Cooner, maybe you can clarify the process. We followed it with other projects in order for them to get going very quickly. Given the length of time that it takes to put in place borrowing bylaws through MFA and Metro Vancouver approval and inspector of municipalities, it can be up to 2 years to get a borrowing bylaw that can be used for permanent funding. And we followed this process with other projects such that there's no intention to borrow the full amount for the entire project, but we get going with that borrowing bylaw of a certain amount. I don't believe that it was the budget envelope of 25 million, so to characterize it as going up by 6.9 isn't accurate. And so what we have here is a situation where we're finalizing the funding envelope and using the borrowing bylaw to contribute to funding the project, similar to what has been occurring with every other project, such as the ice sheets and arenas project. It was never anticipated to be 49 million, but we're not funding the whole thing through external borrowing. Does that clarify that correctly, Mr. Cooner?
Your worship, I'll add a bit more. So essentially, the borrowing bylaws will require provincial and metro approval. That's a process within itself, and it adds time to it to be more efficient. And to bring those borrowing bylaws forward, we took a bit of a different approach. So essentially, the 25 million was a base facility construction to get the borrowing bylaw through the process. And then that was the initial amount tabled to begin the loan approval, with direction to staff to essentially undertake further site assessments, design works, and determine the actual cost to construct the township fire hall to ensure that it meets community needs, adheres to modern standards, and future operational needs. So there was always an understanding that that's to just begin the process, and the actual cost of the hall would be a different number.
And once you define the scope to be 2.5 crews, and you go through a process of consultation and refinement through the integrated project delivery team, you come back with a better number, a more accurate number that proceeds with the project. This idea that it's over budget, again, is just not accurate. Either that or don't understand the process. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there saying that the 25 million figure was based on past practices in other places, and that was over a year ago. And I would really find it interesting if anyone can pull a crystal ball out and come up with an accurate figure that is going to project it a year into the future, and still going forward, can't even tell what the exact figure is going to be going forward. I seem to recall an awful lot of projects nowadays. In fact, I can't recall any that aren't over budget in the current atmosphere, where the price of especially concrete and other things like that are climbing rapidly. So to sit there and think that a year later and 25 estimation is a more accurate way to put $25 million after an extensive program of 1 year of a committee looking at the realities of building this thing. I think it's great that they've come up with a figure now, and I would expect that there are possibilities of something changing that even during this process. They're looking at another year to have this built. I, for one, am not able to look into the future. I wish I had that ability like others do, and come up with this accurate figure. So I think the pointing out that this is already 28% over budget is shallow, to say the least.
Councillor Kunst?
Oh, yeah. So first of all, I would like to say that I am supporting this, but I do have questions. I have a question about the phrase that says, to be funded from community amenity contributions as available. So how do we as a municipality determine which projects get funding? Because, and where, like, I want to see this complete, so I wouldn't want to see another project get the CACs if, we need to finish this one and let's get it done as soon as we can because of what Councillor Bailey just suggested about cost overruns and everything else. So that my question would be is as available, what does that actually mean? Do they get the first CACs that come up?
Mr. Cooner?
Your worship, to Councillor Kunst. So essentially, we need authorization from council to use CAC funding to pay for this project. The fire hall is within the CAC policy, and when the CAC funds are available, we'd be using that when the fire hall is progressed or we're requiring a funding when the time is appropriate. So essentially, this would be the priority project at that time to see the CAC funding to complete it.
So this would sort of beat out maybe other projects that would need CAC funding?
To your worship, Councillor Kunz, it would just depend at that time if there was potentially more efficient way of internally sourcing funds and then using CACs to pay those funds that have been internally sourced. It's premature to probably state what project would take priority at the time when the funds are available.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. When I look at other major capital projects, for instance, it's an item later on the agenda with the North Langley truck route, a pretty healthy contingency is worked into the cost. In this case, for the truck route, something like 40%. And I was wondering if at this stage, staff would be able to give us an idea if that contingency is included in that 31.9 million and what it might look like, or if that's preemptive at this point to ask about that.
Your Worship, to Councillor Pratt, the class estimates generally go D, C, B, A, 40, 30, 20, 10, if you just in total estimates. This is approximately similar to a class A, so there's about a 10% contingency built in through the IPD process that Directors Groves and Chauhan have been through with the fire department.
Awesome, that's great to know. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of people are speaking on this is good because it is a fire hall, and fire halls are important, and safety is important. We talked a little bit earlier about the fire hall in Vancouver, number 17, and my daughter lives close by there, so I buy that hall all the time. And over the years, I didn't think it ever going to get built, but it looks great, and it's serving a great purpose because it's a fire hall for safety reasons. Also, we talked about environmental additions or opportunities as well. So, I mean, the thing is, all those things add to potential, not necessarily valid or otherwise potential increases, but for the benefit of the future. And I know, I don't want to go to Mr. Winslade again. I know we've saved substantial amounts of money because we've gone through a number of environmental opportunities on this building. Also, I used to like to use other examples of things that have gone overruns. And I look at Surrey Municipal Hall. I think we are okay with the event center, but we had to chase down the probably the builders or our construction folks for deficiencies, and those are things that happen later, and there's sometimes a cost to that, sometimes there isn't, but I can't think of any major facility that didn't have to have some either change orders or other increases on the funding envelope. Thank you.
Councillor Martins?
Thank you. I'm excited to see this with so much detail here in this report, and thank you to staff for that. Anything related to emergency services, to me, that is a very clear commitment that we should be making. First and foremost, it impacts the safety of our community. What I would like to know, because I noticed partway through the report, it says the fire hall's design incorporates flexibility and scalability to accommodate future growth and meet the evolving community's needs. So I know when we're looking at the neighborhood plans here nearby recently in our conversations, is that considered future growth and evolving community needs, or has this design taken into consideration what we're looking at for those neighborhood plans?
Mr. Cooner?
Dear Worship, to Council Martin, it's even doing a larger holistic approach by looking at the population projections, not within just the Brookswood neighborhood area, but also within the township itself, and to service Southern Langley as well, and to take into consideration having officers there with a 2.5 crew as well.
Right. So when it's talking about accommodating future growth, like flexibility, it is truly going to be able to accommodate that growth that you've just described and that population?
Dear Worship, to Council Martins, that is correct.
Yeah. Can you, sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, if I can through the chair, it's just what are we looking at a projected population that this facility might be available to serve?
I think it would be also important to note that it'll be serving the new employment land area as well. So it would be about total development area along with new schools, new population, potentially, I believe the last report, Mr. Cooner itemized future projections of 60,000 residents in addition to the employment lands.
Dear Worship, Council Martins, those figures I believe are approximate, yes, and we can provide further population projections. I don't have those handy off the top of my head here, but that can be provided.
Yeah, that's okay, and I know I apologize for putting you on the spot on that. I just think it just really highlights the importance of this facility, and the extent of who and what it's going to serve us is really enormous, and I think I'm happy that we're having this conversation of getting on it now rather than waiting till it's all built out and then trying to catch up. I think that this is very sound planning for a community when it comes to emergency services. A question, if I may, I noticed the chief is here in the audience. I don't know if this is getting too specific, but I was interested with, this is the first township fire hall designed based on a composite career and paid call fire service delivery model, active and in mind. How does that make it look different than our current existing fire halls, if I might? And I'm sorry, maybe getting a little too into the weeds, but I'm very fascinated by what the differences would be.
Good afternoon. Through your worship. So yes, it has been 18 years since we built our last fire hall. Fire Hall 2 in Fort Langley would have been our last fire hall. So when it was built, it was based on a pay call response model. So since then, as you know, 2006, we became a composite department having career and pay call. As you can imagine, with pay call, they're responding to the hall and getting suited up and responding to calls, but they're not necessarily living there, which is what our career staff would be doing and working long shifts. We've also learned over the years just the exposure that firefighters face and potential cancer exposure and things like that. We're trying to take all the considerations into account. It's a progression on the way you enter the hall. It's going from dirty to clean, and the way we handle our turnout gear, the way we clean ourselves off, the way we decontaminate, all those things. None of the halls, except for this one in the planning stages, have been built that way. So this is something we're trying to take into account, and you guys, you mentioned it earlier, but we were trying to think of everything, be prepared for the future. We don't want to have to come back later, like Hall 4, as you're all aware, to try to extend the driveway because we didn't think of considerations into the future or have to make renovations to try to accommodate. So the integrated project delivery team was amazing to have all the subject matter experts in one room to actually be able to get those answers quickly and to try to create those efficiencies and think of everything. So we're trying to get ahead of it, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Like I said, I'm really excited about this. I fully support it. We need to look after our firefighters who look after our community, and it's growing rapidly. And I'm glad that we are being forward thinking in all of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Richter?
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the community amenity contributions through you to, I guess, Mr. Cooner. Do we have 6.9 million in available community amenity contributions right now?
Your worship, to Councilor Richter, yes, we do.
Yes, okay. And then the second paragraph, which says the waiving of Township of Langley fees where applicable, or internally funding such fees from existing sources. What fees are we actually talking about there?
I believe, Mr. Cooner, that would be building permit fees.
To your worship, to Councilor Richter, that is correct. Building permit fees, service connection fees, utility connection fees, and potentially looking at DCC fees, but we have to take into consideration the Local Government Act, as I think there's a certain element that allows us to waive.
I don't believe any waiver is legislatively available.
Okay, so we're going to self-finance those fees, I guess is...
I believe, Mr. Cooner, they're just not going to pay building permit fees to ourselves. Is that correct?
To your worship, we just, to Councilor Richter, we would have to see the policy within. Either we can exempt ourselves, or we just internally source, we offset it. We just pay ourselves, but we're offsetting the cost.
Offsetting the cost, okay. And but we do have the fees to allow for this increase, and this price of 31.9 million is firm.
That, through your worship, Councilor Richter, takes into consideration even the Metro and TransLink fees as well, so that's relatively a firm number.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, I'd really like to thank everyone for getting it to this phase, because a large part of my career, including up to today, and I've been out of the service now for almost 13 years and still involved with OH&S dealing with firefighters. And in that 13 years, things have changed dramatically. I will point out to the finding of the PFAS. PFAS in our turnout gear is a very recent discovery and action. And this hall being built like this is not only for the residents of the township and for the firefighters, it's also for the people that transition through our community. And I will point it at 16th Avenue, which is a major thoroughfare, and it's going to get busier and busier and busier. And by building in a 2.5, that gives the chief and the department the flexibility as everything changes. So King, just on the projected population, we have to remember things like rescue, auto extrication, and I'll point to West Vancouver that has the Sea to Sky Highway. And there is extensive, and all of the North Shore actually, where so many people are transitioning through, and a big part is rescue. So I am really glad to see extra room being put into this. So it's not like Hall 2. Hall 2 was built in a year when we were transitioning into a career, and at best we're going to have to accommodate that because it wasn't built with the same kind of foresight. And I will point to one of the facts that it's the fire department that is involved in this, and that includes the union. That includes the firefighters that are going to live and work in this hall. And it is so nice to see that this process that is being done now is including the people that have to live and work in that hall. So I congratulate everyone that's associated with this, not just the fire department, but the firefighters themselves and the builders that are going to be, I have had experience with the IDP and know that it is saving, not only saving a lot of money, but looking forward to flexibility within the department and flexibility into the way that you fight fires and you do rescue operations. And I am really glad. This is probably the first hall that I've seen, and believe me, in my career, well, one stretch, there was 5 fire halls built in 5 years. Never with this kind of foresight, and with the ability to adapt to what's going to come in the future. So well done, Chief. Well done to the other members of the exempt staff, and also to the union and their involvement. Thank you.
Councilor Ferguson?
Oh, yes, the integrated project delivery, the IDP, is very well documented here. But I did want to say that this is something that Brookswood has been looking for a long time. We've been waiting. So thank you to staff. Thank you to Councillor Bailey and his efforts to push this forward. He's got experience in that, as well as others do on this council, but I do want to give credit where credit's due. Thank you for those that submitted requests for this hall over the years, and it's exciting. It is exciting. Another part of the exciting, and I was hoping the chief would stay up here, is the part, do you anticipate the chief having more folks apply for the paid call side, if I may? I know I was trying to get you to stay up there. So you understand the question, right? If I may, through the chair, of course.
Your worship, I believe you were asking about pay call, if they're still interested.
That's right, that's
yes.
correct.
Yes, we just concluded posting for pay call just closed, and there's actually a lot of interest still.
Okay. And how are you making out? I know you're not alone as chiefs within the region, if not the country, getting recruits for IAFF, your union side, if I may.
Yeah, I know we spoke about it last year. It's been a climate that none of us have seen before. There's so many departments that are hiring in large groups as well that it's basically a very competitive process, and we're fighting for the same candidates. That makes it challenging. There's only so many qualified trained candidates to pick from in the pool too as well. So, we were kind of going through a stretch here I haven't seen before in my time. And hopefully we'll get through it, but we still all are getting amazing candidates, and I'm confident we will into the future as well.
Yeah, thank you for coming today. I know you got your deputy chief there as well, or one of the training officers. I appreciate you coming as well, and appreciate all the things. And Brookswood, they're excited about it. Thank you very much.
We are too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think the discussion about a Fire Hall 5 replacement in Brookswood has been going on for a long time. I think we saw last term significant response times to the Brookswood area with fire incident after fire incident. So on a path to solve that is a great thing to see. We see the cost of these things and what they turn into when we don't plan for the future many years ago. I think it's pretty interesting to hear that a community growing like this one has not built a hall in 20 years. I think that that's obviously one of the reasons we're seeing it now at the $32 million price tag. The fact that it wasn't done that 5 to 10 years ago. The other thing that's interesting about this one, which I like, is the two and a half crew planning for the future, planning for medical calls, which have a number of savings around the different apparatus that can be used and other things that have a lot of operational savings when we invest in a hall of this quality and thinking for the long term, like this council definitely is. So I want to thank everybody again who had a hand in getting it to this stage and seeing it almost close to commencing construction. I would appreciate everybody who's been a part of the project delivery team, from the fire department to special projects to this council that has funded this and given clear direction for it to proceed. So everybody that had a hand in this, thank you for that. I call the question on E11. That carries unanimously. Item E12, I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on E12? Councillor Richter.
Yes. I would like to know what the anticipated cost for this training center is going to be, the priority for it right now, and where the funding is going to come from.
Mr. Cooner?
To your worship, to Council Rector, I believe the estimated cost is approximately $9 million. The funding source and where the funding is going to be brought forward from would be dealt with in a separate report that hasn't been determined at this time.
Okay, so we're not approving the $9 million right now. We're just approving the proposed scope and site layout.
To your worship, to Council Richter, that is correct.
Okay, and what priority is this? We already have a training center.
Mr. Cooner, I think those priorities are set by council. I believe this is following up on council direction.
Yes, your worship, that's correct. So this is, I believe, on council direction, and this would be then brought forward at a separate date, and it would be up to council to then approve the funding source and the funding amount to ensure that this training center is built at that time.
So is it possible that the grant that we've approved submission to the FCM for $10 million, could that be put towards this project?
Mr. Cooner, I believe that cannot. Is that correct?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, I believe that specific grant cannot. Potentially the other barring bylaw could be allocated towards this fire training hall, the 25 that's already been approved.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, this is almost as exciting as Hall 5. When we're looking at this, if we don't turn this into a fire facility, it will revert to the Crown. This is Crown land. And I can tell you, if we get this for $9 million, a facility that would be on par nowadays is going for about $50 million. So this is an incredible opportunity that is with us now. And if we don't move on this, then there is a possibility that we could lose this and have zero in compensation come back. And when it comes to another reason why you want to do this is, while we have a training yard in the operations yard, they've been trying to get into that space for quite a while. So by doing this, we're going to enhance our training. We're going to take advantage of a very unique situation. We're going to be able to give the works yard more space that they need as we go forward. And I'm already getting calls that I relate to the chief about, can we rent this facility, because there is such a shortage in training facilities right now, and the ability to combine external sources with your own internal training. This will also have the ability to generate funds. And the fact that it's It's not even close to getting off the ground right now. There is interest from a couple of departments and a couple of private enterprises that would like to utilize this and pay us for it. So this is a very unique and timely opportunity. We've got this. If we don't do it now, we'll lose it. And the ability to have a dedicated training center at our disposal so our firefighters have greater access to it is incredible. Rather than going and renting facilities over in Maple Ridge at the JI or going over to pay money to other facilities like Surrey and Delta, this is incredible to see, and so glad that we're taking advantage of it.
Yeah, Mr. Kuhn, I'd like to clarify too, this, it's outlined a bit within the report, but this is great to see. I know I've been on council, we've been looking and asking for solutions to relocate training out of the Murrayville Works Yard to provide them with more room that they need and see this be upgraded. When I toured the Surrey training facility, it was amazing to be there when there happened to be training ongoing and seeing the quality of that. To see something like that in the Township of Langley would be fantastic, and also allow, as we continue to expand the size of full-time membership, provide the training for a community that is looking for when it will become 250,000 people, and what is on par with what training facilities do we require to run the fire department. But specifically, I think it's fantastic to see this on a path to proceeding after so many years of hearing about it. But what's the value to relocating it out of the Murrayville Works Yard? I'd like to have council get a bit more on that.
Your Worship, the first item that comes to my mind is that the fire hall that's existing there on 203, 55, and 32nd Avenue, that then will be the new fire hall by 27th and 200th there. The site must be used for fire hall purposes, so staff has kind of focused the feasibility study to ensure that there will be something that's ancillary to fire hall or training center to ensure that the site does not revert back to the province. So it's a unique opportunity we have, an opportunity we should not lose, and have something ancillary to fire hall or a fire hall training center to ensure that site stays within the township or stays with the township.
Maybe Mr. Rule can speak to the intangible value of freeing up that space, significant amount of space at the Murrayville Works Yard.
Yeah, Your Worship, we've had incidents in the yard due to the congestion between equipment and vehicles. And then at least one incident which was a near miss with an employee. Luckily, nobody has been hurt. So we'll be using the area for fleet parking, some staff parking, material storage, and other ancillary items.
So I think it's hard to underestimate the value of that and the overall benefit to the municipality, not just the fire department or members or public safety, but there's a long-term plan here in place to provide a next level of quality of facilities, including the works yard, but also firefighter training. Again, under discussion for many, many years, and finally we're on a path to getting it done due to this council. Councilor Martins.
Thank you. Just looking for a little bit of clarification, if I can, through the chair to staff, that it must be used for fire hall purposes. Is it specifically time sensitive as to how quickly we do? I understand there's going to be a transition for the whole building of the new hall. I'm just wondering, do we have breathing room, or as soon as we've decided that we are relocating the hall, the active hall, are we obliged to inform the province of our plans for that space to hang on to it?
To Your Worship, to Council Martin, sooner than later we would like to have these discussions with the province and notify them, because if there's any issues that we can hopefully deal with them early on rather than have this item addressed last minute and any concerns that we may not be able to address at that time.
Okay, is it necessary that we are looking at the funding at this point and the specific plans? Because I'm assuming it's going to be a little down the road. We can't start doing that until we build the other hall, or how does that look timing-wise for the two projects?
To Your Worship, Council Martins, in a perfect world, it would be that the new Fire Hall 5 would be built and the transition will occur, and then the Brookswood Fire Hall, either the development of it can start early on, but will then hopefully be completed once the new fire hall is running and the crews have shifted, and that the old fire hall 5 would then be used for this purposes training.
Yeah, I believe, Mr. Cooner, it's also an option that's being considered that if council were to revisit this potentially in September or some other time frame, maybe when the outcome of that grant application is known, that it may be possible for council to approve and have these two projects run concurrently.
That is an option.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And then just looking at the actual plan for the site, there's a 4-story steel shipping container training structure. How high would that structure be in feet?
As they're conferring, I'll just add to the previous question as well, in that there already is fire training that goes on at this site, utilizing the parking and some of the other areas. So I think a lot of that would continue. So there also would be an intermediate period between fire hall to full training center, where it'd be our continued intermediate training center. As far as the height goes, do we have an estimate? About 32 feet.
Okay.
4 stories of 8 feet, I think.
32 feet-ish? Okay. Has there been any conversations with the people living in close proximity, the surrounding properties? Like, I know that there's going to be an 8-foot fence or sort of perimeter in this plan, but that's quite a bit higher. So I'm just curious if we have engaged at all the community on that aspect, just being mindful of how they'd feel about it.
Dear Worship, to Councillor Martin's not at this time. In the event council endorses this site layout, then there definitely staff will do some consultation and engagement with the neighborhood.
Okay, so if we're endorsing it, is it consultation or is it advising? Like, just wondering how that looks, or is this plan, open to change based on perhaps what we hear back?
Would be mostly engaging, through your worship, to Council Martin's, the neighborhood, and advising them of this. In the event council does want to change the scope of programming or site layout, it's within their purview to do so prior to potentially the funding sourcing being identified and approved.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I definitely see the value of this facility. I agree with hanging on to the property for fire usage, and I recognize that we need more room up at our operations yard for sure. So it is a win-win. Just trying to understand more of the logistics of how it all works. So thank you for answering those questions.
Yeah, Mr. Cooner, I also noted, I think in meetings with staff that I've had about it, that facility is located on the eastern side of the property, which is adjacent to open green space and park areas, not directly adjacent to any housing. And so I think that was important for me to see that. And also I've asked staff to consider multiple times whether or not they would bring to council some significant landscaping and other setbacks that would eventually see that grow in and hide the facility and screen the facility for those that are there, and have it have the least impact on the neighborhood as possible. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, just one last comment. I was interested to hear about the possible revenue sources that could come from that. Would that be included in the update?
Mr. Cooner, I believe that's an excellent point. I don't think it was a requirement for me, but I think it would be helpful to see what a potential business case it could be. And of course, potentially considering a City of Langley surcharge.
That's something staff can definitely consider.
Yep. I was joking, by the way. Nobody thinks I'm kidding anymore when I mentioned the City of Langley. I think we would be open to charging them the same rate as other departments. But when it comes to the City of Langley, no one thinks I'm joking anymore. Councillor Kunst?
I don't know what to say about that. Yeah, no, I just think that would make a really great case, because I see the potential of this. This is like, especially when we hear from operations, the need for more space. So anything that helps to, make this viable, helps the taxpayers. So they don't have to, yeah, anyway, that was just my thought.
And then when we toured the City of Surrey facility, we heard that they were unable to rent it out to the same degree because their department is so large and requires so much training now. I believe there is some opportunities for newer facilities to be a draw within the region. And I'll let Councillor Bailey speak to that. Councillor Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, right now what happens is first you take care of your own training, and then you rent out the rest of it. So if we don't do this and we go and rent other facilities, we're at the time and discretion of the other facility. By having this, we set our own times that fit with our schedules and that. When it comes to height of fire halls is always up in around 30 plus feet because we have hose towers, and that's where you have your hoses don't dry mechanically unless they have to. They usually just get hung and they air dry. So hose towers are not exceptional, and the height especially is needed, because one of the things that firefighters now do, and that in the future I'm quite sure we're going to see, is high angle rescue. So what you do is you get up on the top of these 4 containers and you have anchor points and that, and it is a very valuable training aspect that this can cover off that we're not capable of doing right now. We can do it at the yard, but again, you hear about already having conflict with operations in the yard. This gives us control of our training that we've never had. And as we expand the fire department and expand the needs with high angle rescue, which we've already got 2 towers going up, and we're going to have a whole lot more, it looks like, in the future. Below grade rescue and a lot of other things that this department traditionally has not participated in. So this kind of facility that we control and we make it suit our timetables is extremely valuable. And that is why you've seen Delta, you've seen Surrey, and that invest heavily. Not nearly as heavy. We're getting, like I said, we're getting away with an incredible deal here, and it benefits their firefighters, and it is a significant revenue producer. We already have Burnaby come and train in our operations yard, and when it comes to medical training, that is what is already being asked, and we can do that very quickly.
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the second paragraph here that says council directs staff to bring forward potential funding sources for the new fire training center upon resolution of the final funding sources for the new Brookswood Fire Hall. Is that intended that a report would come to us, or is it coming as part of the budget process, or is it just coming as a resolution for council to adopt?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, the intent would be that staff bring a report to council to consider the potential funding sources.
Okay. And when would we anticipate getting this report?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, it is contingent on final resolution of the funding sources for the new Brookswood Fire Hall. So it would be, I believe, subsequent to when we hear from the FCM in relation to the grant.
Okay. And my last question is, the building that's currently there right now, the existing fire hall, will any of it be retained, or is it going to be torn down and replaced?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, I believe it will be retained.
Okay.
And renovated, I believe. Yeah, retained and renovated.
All right. And why does the new training center need staffing quarters? Is it going to be staffed full-time?
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, there'll be training officers there.
So they would be living there or just having offices there?
Just offices there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, call a question on E12. That carries unanimously. Bylaws for first, second, and third reading. G1, Council Procedure Bylaw Amendment. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on G1? Seeing none, call a question on G1. That carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Kuntz, Councillor Martins opposed. Item G2, 2024 Development Cost Charges Bylaw Amendment. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on G2? Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, so what happens if it, this is the Langley DCC, what happens if it's not removed? Like, I don't even actually know how this actually all works. So if it stays in there, does that mean that we would collect? So obviously it needs to be removed, but anyway, I just had a question about this.
Councillor Cooner, or sorry, yeah, oh man, do it again. Mr. Cooner, go ahead. Big cut in pay for sure.
Dear Worship, to Councillor Kunst. So originally the 232nd Highway 1 widening project was in the DCC program. The ministry had advised us that since we weren't proceeding with the arrangement, cost-sharing arrangement, therefore it needs to be removed from the DCC program. Therefore, we have to bring the bylaw forward, remove it, receive all 3 readings, and then send it to the ministry for approval. This would essentially, I believe, reduce it nominally, the DCC charges, because the program is now being removed from the DCC road bylaw, I believe.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Martins?
Yeah, thank you. And again, through the chair to staff. So this letter that we have in front of us is from the Inspector of Municipalities from the province. And I'm sorry, I'm keeping this simple for myself. So because we are not contributing 27 million to the Highway 1 widening project at 232nd Street overpass, where we were, I guess we could be collecting DCCs for that project, we no longer are able to collect DCCs because we're not paying for the project. Is that the logic of what this means? Or if you could clarify, I'd appreciate it.
I think that's pretty close, Mr. Cooner.
To your worship, to Councillor Martins, it's a fair characterization.
Okay, thank you. All right, is it typical that we get these sorts of letters from the Inspector of Municipalities, or have there been others that I haven't noticed recently, or where if we make a decision about opting out of a project, that we're being ordered to change our bylaw, and it seems like it's been pretty short order. It comes across as quite a strong message, or is this normal?
To your worship, to Councillor Martins, some of these letters are normal, usually not as passive-aggressive.
All right, so I am picking up on the correct theme then of the way the letter is worded, that it's directive, not directive. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I think it was pretty directive. I think it was pretty clear that this had to be here.
Okay, did we anticipate this coming, I guess, would be my last question.
Yeah, I had a meeting with staff about it when council made the decision referenced in the letter. And it was advised at that time that this could have been done at the end of the year with a potential review of the roads DCC program to have other projects added or updated, which would have been this amount or more. But I believe that was communicated to the inspector, Mr. Cooner, and that potential process for the end of the year proposed by the township was not accepted.
That is correct. That there was discussions with ministry staff to potentially have the DCC cost charges bylaw updated at a later date, but with very little notice, a letter was provided to the Director of Finance indicating the specific date they want this DCC bylaw updated.
And it would have had no practical impact on the DCC rates because I think we'll be looking at an increase, a marginal inflation-based increase with some reviews, and this would have been handled at that time, and rates would have gone up slightly. Now they're going to go down slightly and go back up slightly. So staff will be dealing with 3 transitionary periods in 18 months. Does that sound about right? I believe there was a desire to avoid that for staff and for the development industry. Again, that was communicated to the inspector, and that explanation was not accepted.
Okay. All right. No, I appreciate the explanation.
I'm going to highlight for council and the public that this project would be, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cotero, this would be the only project in the DCC program which we do not control the timing of.
Currently, yes. There have been others in the past.
Yeah.
That were led by the province.
Yeah. It's the only one in the program currently, so when development proceeds and they get a DCC project and they implement a portion of it or partially of it, they get a credit for that. So of course, that's at their timing, not at the townships, but a township-funded project. This would be the only one in which it did not have control over when to expend this $27 million. And I believe that was a strong basis for council's decision. I believe, Mr. Cooner, the province made a decision of their own doing to not counteroffer and not come back with a longer-term proposal that could have accommodated the significant deficit that we're dealing with within the roads DCC program. They chose not to do that. Does that be fair?
The discussions weren't extremely fruitful with the province on these items.
There we go. That, I'll call the question on G2. And that carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Bylaws for final adoption, bylaw number 5999. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on I1? Seeing none, call the question on I1. That carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Kunst opposed. I2, bylaw number 5998. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Rent. Is there any discussion on I2? Seeing none, call the question on I2. That carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Kunst opposed. I3, bylaw number 6000. I'll move it. Seconded by Councillor Bailey. Is there any discussion on I3? Oh, go back. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, so, you know, I have tried really hard to support all of this, and the reason I'm not supporting it today is just because I'm just increasingly uncomfortable with the amount of money that we're spending. I believe that we could probably build 4 soccer fields for a lot less than $200 million. So that's why sadly, I just don't feel like the formula, I mean, I hope it works. But right now, I don't really understand the formula. So I just want to, just for the record, just put that out there. Anyway, that's all.
Councillor Richter?
Yeah, so these 3 bylaws for final adoption taken together are roughly $59.6 million. Now, the budget that was approved for the project was, as I recall, 159.7 or 157.9, somewhere in that area. Mr. Cooner, maybe you could correct me on that.
Your Worship, Councillor Richter, I don't believe I have that off the top of my head here. And in the event there's any differences in the funds, I believe the borrowing bylaw would be covered by the CACs for Smith Athletic Park.
Okay, so basically these 3 borrowing bylaws are coming up with, leaving us with still $100 million. Do we have any idea where that $100 million is going to come from?
To Your Worship, Councillor Richter, as I highlighted, it would be from CACs.
CACs, okay, thank you.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yes, if I be through the chair too, I wanted to ask staff, I mean, we've got the three today, the I1, I2, and I3. Can you just give me, for my benefit, maybe perhaps for the council's benefit, what exactly we're doing here, so that maybe the public and the council can be reminded, if I may, through the chair?
Your Worship, to Councillor Ferguson, the characterizations is that these bylaws are now coming forward for council's adoption. We've received AAP, I always mess that up, approval. Therefore, that means that we haven't actually pulled the funds for this, but we have the approval in place and necessary for the project.
And I think the important part is that, you know, we're borrowing this and going through these things for reasons. We're going to put some infrastructure in place, whether it's detention infrastructure, park infrastructure, and I guess facility infrastructure. If I may, is that not correct through the chair?
Your Worship, to Councillor Ferguson, that is correct. Specifically, the I1 is for detention works in relation to not just Smith Athletic Park, but that detention works would benefit the Smith East neighborhood area and the neighborhood plan that's recently been approved in that area.
And I also wanted to point out, the staff may or may want to comment, if I may, through the chair, if we were to build the Langley Events Center today, I believe it would perhaps be, if I may through the chair, over 100 million, if not more, if I may through the chair, including surrounding lands and the other infrastructure.
Mr. Winsley?
Without saying a number, it would be significantly more. We just had an appraisal done for insurance purposes, and then we got a really, really good deal.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much indeed. All I'm saying is that when you assemble lands, when you put in parks, when you put in all-weather fields, when you build a large facility used for hockey and a subsequent facility for basketball and volleyball, and I mean, they're expensive and the same as anything. And if we don't do it now, the public is asking for us to provide for the future, and that's always been a challenge for us at the council table, stuck with something not done in the future. Thank you very much.
Councillor Van Popta?
Yeah, the 200 million price tag is a little bit of a, I don't know. It's not the quite the correct classification of what is occurring here. Yeah, to build 4 soccer fields doesn't cost 200 million, but that cost is including roads, detention ponds, park sites, space. You know, detention ponds aren't sexy, right? And either is building a rugby field for School District 35. But those numbers are lumped into this, and I don't think it's really fair to classify this project in such light that it's, you know, this price tag is, you know, just for some soccer fields. So, you know, I'm happy to get this to the final stage and to get this through, and I'll be supporting it.
Councillor Bailey?
I look at this and if you say put it off for another year, you're not only dealing with another year's inflation, you're not only dealing with the rapidly increasing costs of materials and everything else. And the reality is if you don't do like when you're building a house, take a mortgage, it'll never get done. And if we don't do this and we keep putting it off and putting it off, we see this, we just talked about fire halls. There wasn't a fire hall built for just about 20 years, I believe 18 years, because, well, we can build it next year. And we can build it next year. And every year it increases dramatically in cost. Not just the cost of inflation, but the lost costs of enjoyment. And the lost cost to the citizens and the kids and that would be using this, those societal costs are much harder to quantify or qualify or any of those things. And sooner or later, you've got to take it and you've got to do it. And that's one of the reasons why I ran to do this job. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I should have stayed retired maybe. And get things done now. Because if you don't get them done now, they get piecemealed at best because it gets more expensive all the time. And I worry about the societal cost of not having these in the interim. You look at, refer back to the fire halls again, incredible costs and lost opportunities and lost lives. So I am fully in support of doing this.
Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, and I appreciate everyone's comments. I'm not, opposed to the merits of the project. It's more about the fiscal responsibility that I have to understand how we're possibly going to pay for all of these things. It's not just soccer fields, and I have supported a lot of these projects. So I just, feel like there might have been a way to add 4 soccer fields to our community with not such a high price. And I understand. I mean, I get it. I ran, I got 4 kids. They all played all kinds of sports. So I just saying that maybe there was a way to do this, having 2 soccer fields in each community and, not putting 4 in one, in Willoughby. Maybe Aldergrove would like a couple, Brookswood would like a couple. So that's just all I'm saying. So we can all agree to disagree, but I'm not debating the merits of it. I'm just let's discuss the economics of it and how we pay for it. And that's just where I'm at. Thanks.
Councillor Ferguson?
Oh, yeah, thank you. And I appreciate all the comments by my colleagues. I mean, the thing is, and maybe that's Councillor Bailey might have said it all. You sit here and you go over the budget year by year, and it comes more and more important for us elected officials to understand what's being presented. I am not an expert on planning. I'm not an expert on policing. I'm not an expert on fire, and the list goes on and on and on. So it would be very difficult for any councillor to sit at this table at any time and say, look, we can put in washrooms here, we can put in fire halls there, we can put in police stations here, we can house staff there, and we can build stuff for park and rec. And to come to sit down with that degree of planning, I don't have that experience. We rely on staff, so when we sit down and we put together these plans, it's a well thought out plan. We've got consultants, we've got experts in the area, and this is what we come out. And the costs, we've talked about the costs, they keep rising. You don't have to tell me about that. I've been in some metro committees where we've had some interesting discussions, and it basically is what it is. And for those of us that do believe that we need to move forward as a community, as a growing community with needs for young people, and we met with a school district last week and explained to them how we're building things for their students, for residents in the area. And so I think it's important to note as we move forward that these are necessity things. And I know perhaps we can do things different. I don't know how we can. I have never heard it at this table. I've sat here long enough to, I've had very few things come from the actual council themselves. We rely on our staff to be experts. Certainly, I haven't had a council member redo the budget on their own, never. Anyway, those are my comments. I think it's important. I support this. I support this for the community. It's not cheap, but it's certainly something we need to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Seeing no other speakers, try to wrap this up. I'm sensitive to the numbers. I mean, there's no doubt that what it costs to build world-class facilities today is shocking. I'm going to start with a summary of Yorkson Community Park for the one rugby field for the middle school there and for our own user groups that was left to sit for 10 years, not finished. Land there is now probably somewhere, depending on what you put on it, somewhere around $5 to $7 million an acre. I believe that portion of construction is now $8 million. That's around $20 million for one rugby field. Should we not build it? That's what I'm hearing. And so I think that, I think it'd be careful to throw around sound bites like that, because I'll probably read it in the Fraser Valley Current in a couple of days. Now we're telling our community that we're spending $200 million for 4 soccer fields. It's just not true. So for example, the acquisition of the land is tens of millions of dollars. We'd have to do that regardless of what's put on it, unless we're abandoning our deep partnership with the school district. I'm not hearing that that's being suggested. We have to build the 212th connector because the site where the high school is going is not land developed. So the 212th connector doesn't exist. 208A doesn't exist. 76th Avenue has to be upgraded. A lot of those costs are going to be recovered from development. They have to be provided for anyway. Again, before you do anything with the site or abandon our deal with the school district. As Councillor Ferguson highlighted, the detention pond infrastructure for this site is going to provide some housing further on in the catchment to the west, and will be recovered from growth as part of this project. And some of it will be provided by the township, but also some of it recovered from development, as are the costs being fronted for the road to land develop this area. The site it's an expensive site. There's a significant amount of money required to remove all the organic material and have it to be constructible before you put anything on it. And that's $20 million that you're seeing here on the agenda today. So these costs are there regardless of what's put on it, whether it's made a tree park or some other amenity or amazing athletic facilities for what sounds like is going to be 3,000 future students at a middle and high school. That's what, to me, developing and building this community looks like. Anybody can oppose something like this and call it too expensive. And I appreciate that the numbers are shocking. But I also don't appreciate the amount of time I have to spend correcting these these statements. So with that, I'll call the question on I3. That carries. Councillor Richter, Councillor Kunst opposed. Mayor and council report. Does anybody wish to make a mayor and council report? Anybody wish to make Metro Vancouver? Councillor Richter, you making a?
No, I probably jumped the gun. I just had a question with regards to, L1.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Just want to clarify that, does anybody have any report they wish to make from mayor and council or Metro Vancouver? No? Nobody has a report? Okay, so Councillor Richter, L1.
Okay, so my question on this was, we released this motion from the last closed meeting of council, but I'm still not clear how the newspapers got it before we released it. Was that ever determined?
Mr. Cooner, I think it would be important to go over this again, and I'll certainly have a few comments here in a moment.
To your worship, to Councillor Richter, my recollection of events was the RCMP had provided a joint de-integration report to the Township of Langley and the City of Langley. City of Langley issued a press release mentioning or commenting about the joint RCMP de-integration report. Within that press release, they did make some comments in relation to destabilized policing and cost, which are some of them were not factual comments or cherry picking from the report. Subsequently, the media outlets had reached out to the township for their comments in relation to that, and I believe during those communications, the report was provided to just one media representative to clarify the facts, and then the item, as you can see, was brought forward to close the report, and then the report was released from close. Now is available in the event anyone would like to see that report.
I believe, Mr. Cooner, it'd be important to highlight that this was a public document. It was provided on the closed agenda at the last council meeting. I'm going to say that again. Was on the agenda at the last council meeting, provided to all members of council on the Thursday prior to that council meeting. But it was, in fact, a public document. And therefore, while intended for internal purposes, was a public document, was put on the agenda for council to have discussions regarding the de-integration process within the special closed parameters, and then was released. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, could I ask a couple of questions of clarification on that? So it was the City of Langley who released the document, or was it the Township of Langley who released the document to the newspapers?
I believe there would be disagreement around that. If it's being quoted in a press release and then it's misrepresenting, and I believe we had a meeting about it Monday morning, cherry picking specific facts and representing them to the public, that they're the ones that had discussed the existence of the report and the contents of the report. And it was determined within the time frame that we had that providing it to one member of the media that was inquiring was the only way to correct what the City of Langley was doing.
So the township actually was the one that released the document?
I would say the Township of Langley is the one that provided a copy of a internal document, which was a public document, FOIable, provided it to the media to ensure that the City of Langley does not represent to our residents that we're destabilizing policing, which is not what's occurring.
Okay, and Mr. Cooner, to your knowledge, is there any kind of a policy or a framework that is normally used when the RCMP issues a joint report like they did on this one? So do they require us both to not release it or not talk about it if they've sent it to us in confidence?
And confidence is a misleading term, Mr. Cooner. It's an internal document.
Your worship, to Councillor Richter, there's no policy currently internally that exists with that, or policy that the RCMP had highlighted to us, and any other specific mentions that the RCMP said in relation to the report. The report, in our view, is in the public forum, and the RCMP had been advised as well of what had transpired.
Okay, so did the RCMP know before June 10th that the report had been released? Like, I'm trying to understand, usually this stuff comes in closed and then it has to be released from closed, which I think is what we did on June the 10th. I'm just not sure why this particular report would be handled prior to June the 10th the way it was.
I believe that's been asked and answered, Councillor Richter.
Oh, yes, that's your famous statement, asked and answered.
Councillor Van Popte?
So just to clarify, any member of the public could have FOI'd this document and released it?
Your Worship, to Councillor Van Popte, in the event a member of the public FOI this, we would be obligated to provide that member of the public a copy of this report.
And they, in turn, could have released it?
To Your Worship, to Councillor Van Popte, hypothetical, but if they chose to release it, they had control and possession of the document.
Okay, so it's not really truly confidential. It's just, you know. Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
It's a very unfortunate situation, top to bottom, for sure. Councillor Martins?
Yeah, I think where I'm finding myself confused with these explanations on this particular one is in this case, on one hand, we're saying it's a public document, but yet for council, it was in special close. So we then are not permitted to speak to what we have in special close until it's released publicly. So it's one or the other. Either the township has determined this to be a public document or it's not. And frankly, I said it last time and I'll say it again, I felt it put me at a disadvantage. Here we've got, you know, earlier in this meeting, we're talking about another emergency service, and you can tell that the member of council is very involved in those conversations, and I understand why with his background and his level of service, and I fully respect that. But for myself, my hands were tied. I was not allowed to talk to anybody about it because the only way I received this report, despite asking, was in special close, which meant I could not speak to it until it was made public through that process. And do members of council have to request through FOI to get a public report? Or can we, like, is it public or isn't it? And I think that's the confusion, and I think that's where things went a little bit awry here. And I guess I would prefer if maybe we could see this as an example moving forward, that perhaps we handle it a little bit differently. If we've determined it is public and it's been released to the public, can it not be public to all of council at that time? I think that would be fair, and that is my request.
Yeah, Mr. Cooner, I think, again, some just the peculiarities of the process are interesting to comment on, but it's important to get it correct. So it was placed on the special closed attendant for the purposes of discussion in closed session in case there were any items council members wish to discuss that were of a closed nature, but it is no way refrains from discussing a public document. If you were to put the inspector's letter from earlier today on special closed, that is a public document in closed on the agenda for closed discussions, not restricting commentary. So perhaps some additional education is required.
Your Worship, I'll use that as an example, actually. So the inspector of municipality sends a letter in the public form. Each mayor and each individual councillor can comment about that letter and their views on that letter. In the event it's placed on the closed agenda, then any discussion that happens in closed or the vote or action that stems out of closed, unless it's released, cannot be talked about in a public forum. So your views on a public document can be discussed in a public forum, just not any discussion of that item in closed or the voting pattern unless it's specifically released.
As I said before, I did request it. I requested what was released to the newspaper to ensure that I was speaking about something that actually was public. And I was not permitted that. And it sounds like from this table, I'm supposed to make an FOI request in order to get what's actually released to the public. Or I could wait until after that meeting and we decided to release this publicly. So
I don't even know how to respond. No one's suggesting you make an FOI request, and your statements at the last council meeting that you did not have the report, I think are proven here today as not correct.
Sorry, and I'm going to disagree with you very strongly. And as I said last time, I still do not know definitively what was provided to the Langley Advance Times because my requests to staff have been denied. We're assuming they're one and the same, but I cannot definitively say that. So that is incorrect, and I wasn't misrepresenting that, and I'm not now. I think it would have been a lot simpler when this had been released to the paper, that we too could have been included in that. I think that would have been respectful of all council, so that it's a level playing field, that we all have the same information. That's my request.
No, that's fair. That's a fair request. I think we can discuss that internally, Mr. Acuna, in a situation like that, which I hope has no precedence to occur again. But I'll state again that the RCMP detachment assessment for the Township of Langley and the City of Langley report be released. You can't release what's not on the agenda. So it was on the agenda, and it was provided to all members of council at the last council meeting, regardless of statements to the otherwise. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I kind of have to correct something. I had no prior information at all about the fire hall or the training facility. The first time I saw that was in this package. So I didn't have any prior exposure and to look at it. Now, I just want to really make sure that to not confuse the two. I heard things were going on. I had zero input as to the design of either one of these things, but I was really glad when I did see them. So in that aspect, I was treated exactly the same as everyone else on council.
Councillor Van Popta?
I suppose if there's a question of whether certain members of council are not receiving their packages on Thursday afternoons with the rest of us, that's something that should be explored. But yeah, we all receive our council packages at the same time on Thursday afternoon, which is receipt of this report. And to suggest that perhaps there's a different version of this report, I think is not somewhere I think it's really disappointing to suggest that that there might be a different version that is being circulated for media or otherwise. It's a report, and you know, if the mayor and staff say that this is the report that was released to the media, then this is the report. And to say otherwise is short of calling them liars, and I don't really appreciate that.
We've belabored this one to death. I think we know that hopefully Fraser Valley Current has heard this. Statements that this was not provided on the agenda at the last council meeting were not correct. We'll move on to item M1. If there's any discussion on actually just do M1 to 3. If there's any discussion on items M1 to 3. No, seeing none, I guess we'll get a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Rint, second by Councillor Bailey. All those in favor? Opposed? Oh, other business. I'm moving too quickly. I actually have an item of other business as well. I almost forgot my own item, Ms. Brower. If you could please bring that up, please. Was there an M question? We got to move faster. Councillor Martins?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Which one?
Yeah. So I would like to talk about M2. They were here delegating to us earlier, and I'm just wondering if we could perhaps, if I can get some clarification from staff on this. So the fees have been calculated at $10,650 for this one tree that was unlawfully removed, if I'm understanding correctly. So first of all, could it have been lawfully removed? And if they had followed the processes set out by the township, what would the cost have been to those people?
Through your worship to Councillor Martins, yes, the tree could have been lawfully removed if they would have applied for a tree removal permit. As far as what the cost would have been, I don't have that information, but it would be substantially less. I can tell you that much.
Okay, so there's not set fees?
There is set fees, but I don't have those with me right now, sorry. And we didn't include that in the memo.
So,
point of information to Mr. I think it's in the report on page 17, 2,500 and 150.
Yeah, that's for removing the tree without permits.
Yeah, that's not the question. Councillor Martin's looking for what it would have been if it had been, process had been followed. Yeah, it would have been substantially less than that.
Okay, so.
Certainly get that provided. I think Councilor Martins is on to something I think which is important for council to consider, that we've got a similar situation on 200 Street that I believe for the purposes of locating a home via the mobile, that permit would have been issued with cash in lieu fees.
That's correct.
And so council would be facing a decision, because I would like to consider them all jointly, not just one, and see if there's a policy change that's required. So I'll let Councilor Martins finish, but I believe that this is something that council should definitely look at. Councilor Martins, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And that is where I'm going with that. I feel like something has changed of late. I don't know what that is. That we've had multiple delegations now with the same concern. And I appreciate the reason for why we have the rules in place, but I'm also wondering if there is an opportunity to, if the proponent is, I'm satisfied that this was an error and perhaps didn't realize, and when I was reading the package, it suggests to me that they were wanting to be amenable and try and sort this out and do the right thing. And if there maybe is some middle ground where we can work with people like that who haven't done it before, who, for lack of better words, a repeat offender, and there's a willingness to work with us. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn that one back to you. I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm wondering if there is some shift that we can do to help people like this, because, for the average person, and there was a delegation at our last meeting as well, some of these fines can be devastating to a family's budget. And I don't think that's the intention of having these hefty fines. So how would that look is my question, and what could we do?
Yeah, I think we could meet and discuss some options. We could certainly bring something back that at least council would adjudicate. I think it was going to require, some maybe an additional memo and maybe some thoughts, and looking at all of the recent ones that we've had delegate, and maybe some others that didn't delegate, I would feel my heart would go just to them as much, who didn't delegate and paid the fine, and maybe it hurt them financially as well. So I'd like to look at the issue holistically and maybe have council consider some options. For me, I mean, if you have any comments right now, but the theory would be you'd have to decide, and maybe if I put this in context, you have to decide between trying to show to the community that tree removal without a permit is a significant problem that we have, and we want to significantly demotivate it. We also don't want to, in my opinion, I'll speak for myself, would want to be cautious with saying that you could take the risk of removing trees without a permit, and then if you're caught, you just pay what you would have paid originally. So there's got to maybe some solution in there in the middle. And do you have any thoughts?
Your worship, not at this time.
Not at this time,
but
so yeah.
I'm pretty happy to sit down and try to come to a solution, because at this time, I think staff is following the bylaw as per the request of council. So we haven't used any discretion just because of the sensitivity of the tree issues that we've heard from council and from the public. But if there's a way for staff to be flexible and come to some decision with some guidelines, we're happy to look at that and happy to think about it and put something forward.
Yeah, and I think we could advance a notice of motion. Maybe a member of council would be quite happy to do that. I'd be quite happy to help any member of council that wants to work on this. I think it's just something for council has to make a decision on, so we set guidelines for staff. And even if it is to leave the bylaw the way it is, this example that Councilor Martins and the delegate are highlighting, would you say maybe one of the more challenging ones, which was highlighted for a driveway potentially, which would have been approved? Is that correct?
Yeah, this one's probably a little more challenging just because it's only one tree. Like, staff could have probably used some discretion and come to a resolution as long as it was something that would be approved by council and following a guideline.
And then an individual removes, I believe, a significant quantity of trees that would be removed from redevelopment anyway, and is putting in place a mobile. How do you consider that issue? That if they had applied for an apartment building, they would have been allowed to essentially remove all of them for the sake of an underground parkade. And here we are charging them $200,000 for removing these trees. So I think there's some work to be done trying to catch these edge cases. And I'm happy to take any other commentary on trying to inform a direction. But I believe you're looking for maybe some flexibility and some other options, because right now you're simply following the bylaw.
That's correct, Your Mayor.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I'll turn you. Go ahead.
No, thank you, and I really appreciate that. And I'm just wondering again, because we've got one delegate here currently. So I believe there's a time frame under which they're required to pay these fines. Would there be ability to pause that while we sort this out, just in general, for any of these ones?
Mr. Cooner?
Dear Worship, Council Martins, would just have to see the reconsideration dates on these ones. I would caution putting this one in abeyance, as it would trigger the other item that's before Council, the delegations that will be coming in the future as well. But that's still within the purview of Council.
So I think you could sort of consider that Council's looking at this maybe, and wait and see what's on the agenda for the 15th, and then you could take no decision as direction just as much as direction. That'd be correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Popta, go ahead.
This delegate was the only delegate that we've had come forward that didn't fill out a tree permit request and indicate that 0 trees were coming out when they in fact cleared cutted trees. So that is my thing. Is this when I feel a lot, a lot more sympathy for, honest error, things like that. But when somebody else fills out paperwork and indicates that they're not removing trees, and then in fact removes 5, 10, 19 trees, that's the part, and the safety of who did it. This is actually an arborist. I think this is the first delegate that's used an arborist. Construction companies and developers know better, and so when they're saying on their paperwork that they're not removing any trees and then do a whole swath of them, I have zero sympathy for that. So just going forward, I know we do need to have some discussions on some of these one-offs, but that's a piece that I do take very seriously, is that if you're lying on your paperwork, you're going to get caught.
Yeah, and I think you see the variety of members of council. They're trying to catch every edge case in a bylaw. May take some additional tweaking, and
right.
I really appreciate that we're open to continuing to look at trying to refine these bylaws in the reality of what's happening in our community. Councillor Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And you might have addressed it, and I think the direction probably is well taken, but just for myself to be sure, and potentially the delegate as well, on the letter from staff to the delegate outlining the fees, they're required to be paid by June 28th, so 4 days from now. But staff has it on good account that is not going to be enforced at this point?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Pratt, it's not an issue. We'll move the time forward.
Okay, appreciate that.
I think you can do a motion if we wish, but I believe you'll take it as discussion, and we'll see what's on the 15th agenda. Is that okay? That work for you? All right. That would apply to anyone in this situation for the moment?
Correct.
Yeah. Is there any other discussion on that item? Anything N1 to 3? No, seeing one other business. Ms. Bauer, can you bring up that? Thank you. So I'll move that. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Rent. I can't see it. Oh, you can't see it? You got to bring it up. You got to kind of remember which button it is. There's quite a delay on these buttons, and so does everybody have it?
Yeah, 1 second.
So this is direction that was already given. However, we need to authorize some funding to proceed with the application if there are no other sources that materialize. So this is just providing a finance request of this, just to proceed with the New Spaces Fund application. Is there any discussion? Councillor Richter.
Okay. I'm not understanding. We have to pay to make an application? We've got to pay $125,000?
Mr. Cooner.
It's in relation to some of the work that needs to be done for the grant application itself. The grant applications, historically, most of them have budget envelopes or funding within the department. This one's a bit unique. Therefore, we need authorization. In the event we're successful with the grant, the funding won't be triggered. We won't be using the $125,000. In the event we are not, then we'd have to use this $125,000.
So is $125,000 to write a grant application the going rate out there?
It's not just with the grant application itself, it's with some of the design and the feasibility studies associated with the application and the locations and I believe some of the technical items that are required as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'll call the question. So this would be a 1. That carries. Councillor Richter opposed. Is there any other business? No other business.
I have one.
Oh.
Go Oilers, go.
Yeah, seeing no other business, get a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Rint. All those in favor, opposed, and that's carried. Thank you.